The main character, sitting at the campfire, played his hands. He decided to prepare food on an open flame on his own. The protagonist noted that he was already dark on the street. Suddenly, unusual luminous objects appeared next to him. The main character looked at them in surprise, fascinated by their unsurpassed beauty. Everything around the main character emitted the glow of these light objects, creating incredible beauty. He jumped on the flowers and sailed just above the surface of the water. The protagonist returned to his friend named Kel, and noted that he was not worried about being a hero. The young man lifted his gaze to the sky and shared from Quill, which seeks to move as far as possible. The thirst for new adventures leads him through this magical world, where he dreams of admiring amazing landscapes. Soon the main character came to the Adventurers Guild. A large bag of poshtar hung on his shoulder. All present in the tavern translated his views on him. One of the visitors noted that he puts 4 copper on what he could do it. The other, holding 5 copper in his hands, asked a friend if it was all he could put. He stated that the pair was ready for 5, that the guy would be defeated. However, nevertheless, the main character confidently stepped forward and did not even shake. Everyone looked after him with the passionate views. One of the visitors was amazed by the fact that the protagonist goes so quietly with all this luggage on his back. His neighbor noted that it looks cool, and only then did he realize that he had never seen him before. The protagonist turned to his friend and asked that he was planning to bring with him this time. It was a completely different world. The protagonist was first chosen as a candidate for the hero, but since then, he became only a courier. Coming out on a narrow street, the hero announced that he would try to perform this delivery. There were no machines, technology, or scientific achievements in this world. His ability, like ordinary Japanese, survive in this world is the ability to move forward. The ability to walk has become his gift from the moment of appearance in this world. The protagonist named Sora approached the counter with meat, eagerly looking at him. The young man turned to the seller and asked 2 barbecues on the skewer. The seller was greeted with the main character and asked if he was working as a courier. Sora seized food and, rejoicing, told his friend Seal that the seller gave them 1 skewer. Sora asked me to wait for Seal. Seal was not wasting the meat. However, Sora managed to pull a piece of food out of his mouth, asking him to do so no longer. Sora inadvertently touched his clothes when he pulled the skewer and got dirty. It did not bother Sora at all, and he immediately took advantage of the magic of purification. Thanks to this, the protagonist was able to completely bring his clothes on. Sora heard someone calling him. It was 2 girls who shouted to Sora, saying that they had come. They asked the main character where he was going today. The girls also noted that the intense smell of meat spreads from the garbage. Meanwhile, Sora inseparably followed the girls. The girl wondered in Sora what happened to him and why he was so strangely looking at the castle. Sora shot a little but quickly reassured himself, saying that everything was fine. The young man remembered how this castle reminded him of the day when he was brought to this unusual world. The girls wondered where he was going. Sora replied that he intended to collect medicinal herbs. Events a month before, in the majestic castle, the king looked at several men and assured them that it was wonderful. He expressed his gratitude to all who responded to his call. Although the king called them 7 heroes, Sora could not get rid of tension. The guy could not understand where he was. Sora remembered how 5 seconds ago, he knew with confidence that he was on the train. He was traveling to the solemn entry ceremony to high school. Suddenly Sora saw a bright flash of light, and before he had managed to understand something, he was already in place. The king stated that he was the kingdom of Alicia, and he is his ruling monarch. He invited the guys who called the brave heroes to visit his castle. The king expressed a fervent desire to overcome the demonic ruler who recently risen from the abyss. Sora was soaked and asked the king once again, which he just said. The king laughed a little and noted that his surprise is quite natural. He said that at first everyone should touch the ball lying on the rack. The king suggested that he start with a person named Sun Manalzi. He touched the ball, and immediately information appeared in front of him. His profession is a swordfish, a level 40, in search of 2 swords of kings. He possessed the skill of the sword, an incredible thirst for battle, the ability to inspire fear, strengthening the body, the ability to blame the enemy with 1 blow, insight and instantaneous speed of thought. Xiong was in the 7th heaven with happiness, and asked who this mysterious king of the sword was. He did not quite understand who it was, but in the title itself, the incredible force was heard. Sora also believed that it sounds cool, as if in some RPG. The king noted that this status is quite impressive. He appealed to the brave heroes to listen to the king. He explained that this is what they call the status panel. Casted characters always have a high status and a wide range of skills. The monarch was passionate about the 7 heroes to use all this against the evil ruler of demons. The king told his subjects that each of them was unique. They all had to become heroes. All of them were chosen. Sora was extremely surprised and asked the king if he was elected. One of the girls was in a state of concern, breaking their head over what happened. The second, without hesitation, confidently stated that she would go next. Among the numerous heroes were the wise magic king, Holidays, the ruler of the spirits, the paladin, and the swordmaster. Their glorious titles became known through the balloon. The boys were quite surprised. Paladin wondered if they were really heroes, because it was cool. Sora felt her tension, because these boys seemed so incredibly cool to her. A few minutes later, the king patted in his palm, attracting the attention of others present. He noted that everything is wonderful. All recognized characters are really talented. The king noted that if the boys need it, they can simply utter Va. Open the status to see it. And here the king pointed to Sora, proclaiming that it was time for the last hero. Sora was worried, thinking that his turn was now. He looked at other boys and thought that each of them has such cool professions. So he also wanted something like that. The guy remembered that he was teaching his friends. He may be able to find a priest. This is what he will decide to find out now. The guy reached out to the ball and touched him. It was Sora Fujimiya, whose full name was known to everyone. He had no constant work, so he remained unemployed. He also had no level. His strength, intelligence, endurance, speed, agility, and luck remained at the initial level. And the only skill was the ability to walk without fatigue. All the heroes, along with the king himself, instantly turned his views on Sora, stunned by the unexpected indicators that he appeared. Sora was deeply upset that he had neither level nor work. The guy realized that his situation was a solid shit. Sora immediately realized that his only ability was the ability to walk. Of course, it seemed quite convenient, but with such a talent to counteract the king of demons will not be easy. The king was silent for a while, but later decided to discuss the stretcher situation with others. After the discussion, the king rose, smiling, and announced that this time there were only 6 heroes. He invited them all to go for him at a solemn feast. But suddenly Sora was anxious to address the king, asking how to be with him. The king turned to the rest of the boys and noted that, by the way, to return to their native world, they need to overcome the king of demons and take possession of his magical stone. The king was convinced that they were waiting for a dangerous journey. But at first, they had to spend the holiday. But this holiday was only for heroes. Sora felt a lot of disappointment because of his indicators, which caused him not to be taken to the heroes team. The man approached the man. He reported Sora of his intention to go there. Her interlocutor only looked at him silently. The security guard opened the door of the hall and ran inside. All the other 6 heroes were already waiting for him, watching carefully at his appearance. The carriage delivered the man from the castle to the gate. Kucher went beyond the gate and stopped. The guy was unceremoniously pulled out of the carriage. At first the man fell to the ground, and then Kucher threw Sori's wallet with money. And so, when the carriage left, the gates closed tightly in front of Palanquin. The guy was angry. He was just invited to a group of 7 heroes and then arrogantly thrown outside. Sora could not understand what was wrong with them. The man caught the bag that he was thrown by the driver and began to open it. I was wondering if he had enough money for what he conceived. The young man shook all the coins from the wallet to the ground and found that there were 2 silver and 10 copper coins among them. Sora was upset with this situation and thought what to do next. Suddenly, his gaze stopped at something. The guy looked at a wide street crowded with a crowd of people. Sora believed that he had already learned all the beauty of this world, but this landscape fully captured his imagination. Watching the houses on this street, the guy noticed that they were embedded with brick and stone. Sora also drew attention to the fact that people are dressed in strange clothes, and here he realized that everything happened just like in the game. Sora sat just among those who strolled the street. Because of this, he began to feel the views of passers-by. Sora felt uncomfortable, starting to fuss and get nervous. The guy immediately broke out of the place and flew the head past all those present who only had time to react to his appearance. Sora apologized to anyone who could accidentally engage. Sora ran, thinking about how it would be thrown from the castle in the eyes of all these people, in the cold and even in such clothing. The guy hurried to a cozy corner where there was no soul. Exhausted, he dropped to the ground and tried to restore his breathing. Sora began to feel sad and think that he was now completely lonely. However, the guy was still not aware of what he was doing and did not know how to proceed. Suddenly he was in his head with restless thoughts, and he exclaimed, "What is nonsense? Only because his skills are not at height yet, that does not mean that he is not suitable for anything. He called the scoundrels of all who were related to the royal court and a group of heroes. I will remember how to have the status. He had to say the magic phrase, B and DK Rye status. It really came in handy, and the guy appeared the status panel. Noticing his modest rating, he grunted dissatisfied that it was full of nonsense. He would very much like his indicators to be much higher than they are now. However, suddenly his gaze fell on one of the indicators. It was an experience meter that showed 996 points of 1,000. Sora realized that his description had changed. The characterization of Sora's skills stated that each step brings 1 score of experience. So, the number of steps he overcame from the castle to the place where he was now turned into experience, which was as much as 996 points. Still, the guy wondered what would happen to him if he was lucky to score 1,000 points. This thought did not give him rest. Suddenly his nose caught some smell. Sora felt the air and realized that the street was filling the appetizing aroma. It seems that it consists entirely of trading benches with flavors. It was at this moment that Sora heard his stomach pitifully. The guy confessed to the incredibly hungry. He had already regretted that he missed breakfast that day. Suddenly, the guy's attention was attracted by the man who approached him. It was a huge man who squeezed a big kitchen knife in his hands. He smiled with a sinister smile, casting an unlovable look at the boy. It made Sora fall into panic, because he did not understand what this man wanted from him, and for what purpose he came to him. The man thought it was his door, which is why he was so angry. Our hero covered his face with his hand, inept explaining to the man who did not know what his guilt, but still apologized to him. Suddenly, for Sora, the man raised his hand sharply. He immediately hit him on his face, forcing him to shout from fear. Suddenly, the boy's face askewers. However, Sora himself was extremely alert, because this result was a surprise for him. The man smiled at the young man and said that he was a skewer specifically for him. He asked the guy if he was a chance. However, everything is fine. This barbecue will be at the expense of the man himself. Having thought and evaluating the events that just happened, he decided that this man was surprisingly good. Sora did not want to get kebab for free, so he told the man that he had money. The guy poured everything on the table and sighed gauze, not sure that he would not have enough to pay for lunch. The man tried to assure Sora that everything was fine and money would not be needed. But the young man could not calm down, constantly apologizing to him. Sora assured that if the funds provided by him, he will definitely find a way to solve this problem. The peasant hesitantly scratching his back and said that, in fact, there is too much money. If it were in some other city, Sora would have long been robbed. In the end, the man noted that he would show the guy how to calculate the money properly. He said that 100 ordinary coins are equal to 1 copper. 100 copper coins turn into 1 silver. 100 silver make up 1 gold coin, and 1,000 gold form 1 platinum. And here, one of his kebabs costs 1 copper coin and 8 ordinary. The man assured that he had enough money for food. Sora sincerely thanked the stranger for his help and explanation. He gave the boy a skewers and noted that he had no idea where he came from, but still warned him to be careful. The man took a step forward, and his eyes expanded with surprise. Sora noted that his level increased again. He became clear to him that for each level, he receives 1 point of skill. Now his experience was 0 of 2,000 possible points of experience, and 1 point in stock. But Sora wondered if he was able to see his status, or maybe others can do it too. Sora noticed that among the skills he had available, the evaluation of evaluation, night vision, body strengthening, healing magic, magic management, and detection. The guy came to the conclusion that these are the skills he can master by spending his points. The man noticed that Sora had immersed himself in reflection and asked him what had happened. The young man was scared, they say. No, nothing special. Sora thought he needed a simple thing. He decided to take advantage of the evaluation and immediately called the window. There, he wrote the question of which he really wanted to spend his points of experience. The guy replied that he wanted it, and Sora was quite surprised. Sora looked at his skewers and saw that he was baked by wolf. This meat was nutritious for the demon, and its quality was high. Sora believed that he could recognize every detail, such as the type of meat and its quality. It was extremely useful to him. Sora reasoned that having gained points of skill, he would be able to master not only a certain level, but also all other skills. The man, without holding back, asked Sora whether he also feels this smell that he just knocks from the panther. But quickly recovering, the guy thanked the seller for the food. So Sora decided to taste the meat of the wolf. When the first piece got into his mouth, his eyes became round with surprise. The young man enjoyed the taste of this dish that he seemed to be incredible to taste. Although the meat did not attract attention, it was surprisingly juicy inside, and spices and marinade give the dish a magical taste, even if it is a demon meat. The young man felt a real pleasure in his taste receptors. Seeing the face of a face full of enthusiasm and a little anxiety, the man became serious. The guy apologized to him and explained that he had not eaten anything for a long time. This caused a man's sincere laughter. The seller praised Sor that he was able to recognize the taste of his meat from the first bite. The man added that the best chefs are unsuccessfully trying to solve his secret. The man turned to the boy, calling him a guy, and asked how he was called. In response, he said that his name was Sora. The seller noted that obviously life in Sora is not easy now, isn't it? And he suggested his support. This caused the guy some confusion. However, Sora did not stop, continuing to eat with such a passion that he exclaimed, "Everyone exceeds Tablinski kebab." Soon the man finished eating and praising the seller, noting that it was incredibly delicious. When Sora was going to go, the man gave him a mantle. Sora hoped that he would not look too highlighting among these people. He was very grateful for meeting with such a good person who herself offered his help. During the conversation, the seller appealed to Sora with advice to buy new clothes because his appearance was quite unusual. He stretched out a piece of paper, pointing out where he should go. Sora noted that he did not feel fatigue, although he passed the city along and across. He was curious. Is it the same walking skill? Sora came to the building with a question that it was a place. The clothing store should be right here. Sora first looked at the sign but could not figure out what language she was written. However, suddenly over the sign, which testified that this building was a sewing workshop, there was an inscription. Sora sincerely hoped that not only he noticed it. Sora decided to go to the sewing shop, and there he was met by a friendly girl. She reported that they had a visitor and he could go inside to take away the measures. The girl started a work that took her for about an hour. For a while he looked in the mirror and was genuinely surprised. It seemed to him that all this was happening in reality, as in play with role-playing tasks. The girl was also delighted with her work. She said she turned out to be wonderful. Of course, she sewed it, given the exact measurements. The girl suddenly noted that his former clothes were made of high-quality fabric, and expressed her desire to buy it. It was extremely surprised by Sora, and he had distrustfully asked her whether she really wanted it. Sora could not believe that he went to buy clothes, but returned for money. For a while, Sora returned to the basement to demonstrate his new outfits. Seeing Sora, the man smiled and noted that now everything had changed. Sora replied that it was only because of him. He expressed his gratitude to the seller for lending him a robe. Sora handed the man to the man, at the same time asking if he could thank for help. The man laughed and asked Sora not to worry about it. However, Sora insisted on his own. The man, a little ashamed, answered him that if he really wishes, he could deliver meat. The seller reported that a hotel is located behind the hill, which is managed by his friend Ali. Sora immediately agreed to this proposal. Sora confessed to a man looking for a place to live. He reacted positively, saying it was good. Ali takes care of him and fed. Moving away from the counter, Sora expressed gratitude to the man for his care, gently calling him his uncle. However, the seller, without losing his opportunity, stopped the boy, asking him to return for a moment. He asked Sora to take a frying pan and join it. It would be his gift. Sora was very surprised and asked the man if he really was serious. Sora answered the man who had no backpack, but the seller immediately recalled that he should take his backpack, and also binoculars to admire the stars. Then the man offered a boomerang just like that, as well as a protective bell in case someone is bad at night. So, I replied to the man that it was probably not able to do this task. After all, it is a real mountain. Sora suddenly stopped and thought, maybe his abilities are still enough for it. The young man assured the seller that he would certainly be able to do everything. Such confidence was well surprised by the interlocutor. Sora lifted a heavy backpack and threw him on his shoulders. The seller assured the man that he did not need to do it at all, because he could tear his back. Nevertheless, Sora straightened and looked forward. It was incredibly impressed by the man, because he could not believe the boy's incredible power. Stepping forward, Sora noticed that a heavy backpack from his shoulders disappeared, making it easy. Sora, woven from hope, again turned to the seller and expressed his sincere gratitude for everything. The seller, a little embarrassed by attention, agreed and asked him to look later. And so, Sora, with a huge suitcase, was accidentally poisoned on the way. A huge mountain stood in front of him, at the very top of which was the hotel. Sora was convinced that it was a real mountain, not a hill. he believed that the concepts had a little different meaning here. Sora was convinced that the old man would have surrendered for a long time. However, now, thanks to his skill, he feels so confident that he is ready to move the mountains. Sora looked and noticed a huge bird with extremely beautiful wings. So, we decided to take advantage of his assessment skills to analyze the bird, and a condition of the conditions suddenly appeared in front of him. This meant that we were talking about a bush. Its eggs are hatched only under high temperature. The temperature of her breast reaches 95 degrees. Sora was stunned, seemed to be a witness of such an unusual event for the first time. There is so much unknown and new in this world. Sora smiled and easily rushed on a bicycle through a rocky needle. The guy confessed that he was feeling easy. Sora first believed that his ability to walk in vain, but in reality it was an extremely useful skill. When Sora was expelled from Alicia Castle, he remained in full confusion, not knowing where to go on or what to do now. However, in the way, he met friendly people who helped him and also a delicious meal. The most amazing was that for this guy in the world was all completely new. Although it was a surprise for Sora, it really enjoys this world. Suddenly Sora stopped sharply, and in his eyes a surprise. The boys appeared in front of the guys, which stretched down to the horizon. The young man was fascinated by the incredible beauty of this place. Sora believed that he was accidentally summoned to this world. He was then thrown from the castle, and he found himself on the street, not imagining what to do next. It was difficult for the boy to believe in everything that happened to him. But now he is watching himself, and it gives him a share of confidence in his actions. Sora goes on a journey using his skill of pedestrian walks to explore this beautiful world. This is a story about how a common conscript, far from heroic feats, tries to find his calling in this world. It was a story about a young man named Sora, who was incredibly exciting. At the same time, information appeared on the status panel. The experience meter was lifted, and now it was only 0 of 3,000. Although 2 experienced units still were counting. Subsequently, Sora got in a small house and looked out the window. He said that he was transferred to this world yesterday, so it was not a dream. Sora reached and thought, this is his first morning in the new world. He began to think about what it was worth starting this day. Sora decided to start the day with the search for a new job. Sora returned to the street, where he came across an already familiar man who was trading. He greeted the seller, turning to him again as his uncle. The man responded to the greeting, stretching the skewer, and asked if he wanted to taste. Sora nodded, saying that yes, he would try to love. The guy thanked the seller for a generous gesture. Sora went to the seller and reported that he was looking for a job. The man, smiling happy, noted that he was good, and wondered what skills he had. Sora thought, not immediately finding what to answer the seller. The man, noticing the hesitation of Sora, explained that it was an alchemy, or, for example, potion. Sora thought again and answered that, unfortunately, he could do nothing like this. The peasant replied that there was one place where his special skills were not necessary. Sora wondered what place he was talking about now. The man assured that it is a place where everyone can find a job, regardless of their abilities. The seller was convinced that it was here that Sora would come across what he was looking for. The man explained Sora that he should pass the main street in the western direction. There will be a large building that you just need to enter. When Sora arrived in place, he realized that the Adventurers Guild is located in this building. With delight in Sora's voice, he noted that this is reminiscent of a role-playing game. The guy was very interested in who they really are. Gathering all his courage, he finally dared to go inside to find out what was really going on. Sora walked into the guild and immediately noticed a few men clutched in a fight. Other brave adventure seekers stood, cheering them with loud exclamations, trying to cheer even harder. A man with dark hair turned to his opponent, noting that he was too pressed on him. In response, the second called him shit. Suddenly, the tension between men increased even harder, and one of them quit his rival the question, why he decided to insist on him. But instead of answering, exactly into an apple, the fist of this man hit the head of Sora. The men began to insult each other acutely, and at this moment Sora felt a strong blow from which he fell on the floor. Sora crying up, breaking his hopes that this place would be different than he imagined. But suddenly Sora got into the mess again. Several books fell on him, and he, confused, looked up. A girl worked in the guild. She noticed that she accidentally drove the books directly on the boy, and immediately began to apologize to him. The girl asked the boy if he was new to the guild. Leaning a little to see it better, she accidentally dropped the rest of the books on Sora. The books were completely immersed in the boy, and the girl apologized before him. Sora pulled his hand out of the book chaos, and told the girl that he wanted to join the guild. The girl was called Makaru, and she worked as a receiver on the reception. Makaru told Sora that she really... Sorry, now they are watching the inventory of old books. Sora assured Makar that there was no good thing with her, and there were no reasons for excitement. The guy, having a little discord, noted her witty awkwardness, but Makar was not so optimistic. He insisted that there was no good in the situation. However, Sora decided to change the topic of conversation and informed Makaro that he had heard about the opportunity to find a job in the guild. Makaru replied that yes, if he was here for the first time, he needs to register first. The girl stretched out a boy and a piece of paper, explaining that the card requires a little blood for the card. The guy was amazed, but still, without hesitation, made a cut on his fingers and put a drop of blood on the card. Then the blood began to seep all over the sheet, and after a while the registration process ended. The card indicated that it was acting under the name of Sora, and also was the signature of the Guild of the Adventurers of the Kingdom of Elysia. Sora was stunned when he looked at his map, and without holding back the surprise, pointed her finger. Makar noted that now his rank is E, and therefore the card is white. Sora asked the girl in surprise what she was talking about. Mika confidently replied that it was what she meant. Makaru explained that there is a hierarchy of ranks in the guild, which starts from E and goes to S. The highest rank is S, whereas E takes the lowest position. Makar asked the boy to look at this wall. The girl noted that all orders came from residents of this city and neighboring villages. She advised Sori to choose any order for her taste and bring it to a rack where they would already know who it is intended. The girl also explained that, successfully completing the task, he will receive points and awards that will help him increase the rating. However, if the task fails, he is fined. It was very surprised by the guy. Sora responded that he had no idea. He looked at the fighters who rushed at each other, and noted that they were not as strong as they were. Makar replied that everything was fine. He had many simple tasks that even a child would easily cope with. Sora, looking closely at the wall with tasks, reflected on the situation. He realized that there were really a lot of different orders. For example, collecting medicinal and charming herbs. Herbs collected in full moon. For this, they are awarded with 2 silver coins, or they are given the task of killing a wolf from a neighboring forest, for which they promise 6 gold coins. Sora thought that he would need a sword to win over the wolf, and was convinced that this call would not be able to. Suddenly, behind the guy came out a chunky man. He leaned to the Sora and warned him not even think of attacking the wolf. And then, in a hurry, that man asked Sora for a request. They say he wanted to tell him something important. The frightened guy hurried to assure that he didn't even think about it. Sora looked carefully at the man who seemed extremely creepy to him, and could not understand why this person was concerned about him. The man struck the tasks with force and said sorry that these trials were exactly under the power of him. It was a task to perform. The guy began to panic, loading himself with numerous tasks. Sora said that yes, he accepts these challenges, taking them all. Moving away from the wall with tasks, Sora thought about what terrible this place is. Guild. Sora approached Makaru and reported that he would now deal with these tasks. The girl took up their ordering. However, she immediately added that he had already fulfilled the order for the traffic police, pharmacists, and 6 other delivery. Mikair asked Sora if he was confident in his own tasks. Sora suggested that he had just had a fear of that guy, and therefore chose such tasks. However, having explained Makaro, he said he really wanted to study the city, so he took so many assignments. Mika-Ru replied that now everything was clear. She approached a pile of packages and reported Sori that it was all his delivery. The guy was extremely surprised by their number. So, he gathered all things, carefully packed them and threw them on his shoulders. Mikaru, saying goodbye, wished Sori a good day, and he only thought about how he was scared by the appearance of these people. He slammed the door of the guild with force and realized that his nerves were on the border. In Japan, such people could only be found at school, but he carefully avoided them. Sora pulled out the map and unfolded it, studying carefully. The guy concluded that in this world everything looks a little different. However, he was not abandoned whether he could finally settle there. To drive away unexpected thoughts, Sora began to twist his head in different directions. The guy confidently replied that he had work, so there is neither time nor an opportunity for depression. At that time, he began to carry the goods. He transferred 5 bags of flour for the merchant guild, 3 knitting herbs for an experienced pharmacist, and many more. So he handed over the last package. Sora thought how many different guilds exist in this world. In addition, he was treated with ice cream. The guy pointed out that despite all the difficulties of the working day, he did not feel exhaustion at all. So, his gate skill proved to be incredibly useful for him. At the team of Soros, a status panel appeared in front of him, which opened an imaginary showcase with information. Sora noted that he was just walking, already found on the 6th level. It seems that the guy noticed that with each increase in level, all his indicators increased by 10. Sora was thinking about how he had to take only 1,000 steps yesterday to increase his level. And today, he was tasked with 7,000 steps, most of which he had already overcome. Sora realized that with the level of increasing the skill points. But the guy noted that this time his stock was not replenished. Then he remembered that he had spent the day before. So I thought that if he continues to go this way, he would be able to discover something new. It has almost reached the desired level. He needed to move on. Soon Sora came to the majestic building and spoke with the owners. Slowly, almost hesitantly, the door on the balcony began to open. A girl came to his balcony. The guy apologized and noticed a girl who wondered what he wanted. Sora began to worry, considering herself just a beauty, like an actress or something like this. In Vidum, Sora replied that he had a personal letter for him. This is a message from a man named Ray Renov. Hearing this name, the girl suddenly kept her breath and took 10 steps back. It was angered by the girl, and she sent her finger to Sora. She announced that she would be right now and asked him to stay still. Sora could not understand what was happening, but froze and wary of further development. Suddenly, the girl resolutely opened the door of the house, and Sora handed her a letter. The girl suddenly grabbed him and started reading instantly. She did not say a single word to Sora, and just slammed the door in front of his nose. Sora remained in place, staring at the door of the house for a few seconds with an expression of surprise on his face. Sora turned to the girl, reminding her of the need to sign. The girl suddenly opened the door again and asked the boy to return to report the order. The girl was overwhelmed by emotions and stretched out sorry leaf. She asked him to hand over this letter Ray. In the same letter, the name Vanessa. The girl asked the boy to accomplish this order. He agreed without hesitation, and she immediately handed him a letter. Going home, Sora plunged into thinking about the whole situation. The young man believed that he was just doing work, but now he was curious about what it was in those letters. He later reached the house of Ray and called the owner loudly, asking if someone was home. The man gently opened the door, looked from them and saw who was heading to him. Sora asked the man if he was called Ray. He replied that yes, this is true. He raised his glasses and asked who he was. Sora apologized to the man and explained that he had remained with him to inform Vanessa about the transfer of his letter. The interlocutor looked at Lee with distrust, not understanding which letter was discussed. The man sat down and began to get an envelope. Sora noted that he also had a letter for Mr. Ray. Sora handed it to the man, informed that it was a leaf from Vanessa. However, Ray still could not understand what was going on, and asked the guy if he wrote to her. The surprised Sora looked at Ray, trying to understand the answer to the question that remained a mystery to him. The man's face was covered with sweat, and Sora noted it. He hinted that it was a leaf from Vanessa. Ray immediately remembered that girl, and admitted that he wrote this love letter in a state of intoxication. The guy began to baptize and declare that he was now feeling a fool, and he should not do so. Sora asked if she was a love letter, but Ray's cheeks were burning with shame, and he did not say a word. Sora was convinced that everything was clear to him, and this was the reason for this reaction of Vanessa. He shared his thoughts with his thoughts that it may have been related to a response to a love letter. Ray agreed that he was most likely. Sora handed a letter to Ray, but inconvenient silence prevailed between them. Ray assured Ray and his support, assuring that he would always be nearby. According to the sort, the answer was successful. Heavenly Ray asked if he really thought. Ray asked the guy for a minute because he was panic. And so the days passed, and Ray tried to reveal the letter and finally decided to read it. After 10 minutes, Ray opened the envelope and took up the letter. Sora, with great interest, tried to figure out what was written in the letter. A few seconds, Ray smiled and answered the boy that everything was fine. Sora hesitated for a moment, but then he grabbed Ray and began to sincerely greet him. It seemed that Ray's soul almost left his body with surprise. He was frightened, and S-Rang returned to his body. After a while, Sora went on the road again. The guy couldn't even think that on his first day he would see that. Sora approached the guild building and found that he had only to report. Today he was surprisingly successful for him. When Sora was a little deep into the guild, he noticed the alert views of other adventurers. It made him strain. Going to Michar past the crowd, he realized that he had completely forgotten these people. He sought to report as soon as possible about the tasks completed to avoid any surprises. Sora approached the rack and carefully outlined his documents in front of the girl. The new moon informed the Makari that he had completed all the cases and handed him these accounts. Mikura called the boy cool because he overcame a whole mountain of tasks. She asked in surprise whether he was not even tired. The guy replied that he was not tired and thanked the girl sincerely for her concern. Mikuras came to Sora and whispered to his ear that there was a letter from Mr. Ray. Sora, a little returning to her, confirmed, "Yes, that's yes." Mikura asked the guy what everything was over. The guy replied that he imagined them together. After his speech in the guild, silence reigned. All the views turned to Sora. The guy immediately felt that his words were heard inappropriate. Suddenly, Sora was picked up and easily tossed up, full of joyful emotions. Sora himself could not understand why they did so. The adventurer seized, proudly stating that he was doing his job perfectly and has already coped perfectly. However, Sora asked him in what sense. Soon, a sophisticated setting tables appeared in the guild, and everyone began to celebrate. The girls behind the counter joyfully clapped, proclaiming that everything succeeded. At that moment, men drank a great amount of alcohol, and one of them noted that Ray would kill him. Another man in response said that for such news he needs to drink a little. One of the adventurers came to Sora, offering him a drink in honor of their celebration. However, Sora was still inadvertent, which caused this sudden festivities. The man told him that the whole guild was already aware of his passion for races. He was silent for 27 years, and now everyone around is celebrating this incredible event. The man lightly patted the guy on his shoulder, and, with laughter, noted that he is now a real Cupid, because he built them together. Sora could not even imagine that he was waiting. Suddenly, the same man who met in the morning appeared behind the back of Sora, and it scared the boy. Sora thought again that he was, not intending to scare him. He apologized to the man, emphasizing that he did not want to offend him. The man asked the guy why when he looked at the wolf order, tried to stop him, but almost killed him, uploading delivery. He called him a word. Sora instantly tensed and looked at the man with distrust. Sora asked the man what he wanted to destroy. He replied that he had no such intention. He bowed his head in front of the guy and said he sought only to protect him. He asked Sora to understand this before he really hurt her. Another adventure seeker squeezed a man from the stretcher and asked that at first glance he was not so. He also advised him to learn how to talk right. I came to think that this man tried to warn him of danger in the morning. Sora reached such conclusions, focusing only on the appearance. And so, when a man spoke with this stranger and several other people, he realized that they were all surprisingly friendly. Suddenly, the door of the guild dissolved, and on the threshold appeared a man with a ray in his hands. He announced to other adventurers that he brought the main star today. Everyone began to chant the name Ray, enthusiastically greeting it. Sora was amazed by the extraordinary friendliness of the members of the guild. They did not slow down to pour the drinks for Ray, noting his victory with joyful exclamations. Sora noted that all these people radiated light energy and were raised. There was a letter in Ray's hands, and everyone was eagerly asking him to read. Sora also decided to greet Ray. Suddenly, the masquerade man began to pour drink directly into his mouth. He turned to Sora, promising to get rid of his hooves, but the man in the mask assured that it was only juice. After all his adventures, Sora realized that he fell in love with this world. A week later, Sora woke up at the hotel where Ali stopped. He stretched and said, "Good morning." Sinking into the life and activity of the guild, Sora became more aware of the world. In conversation with the other, one of the boys raised the theme of drinks from abroad, noting that Oscar is admired by alcohol from the Republic of Eldo. All travelers invited Sora to honor that he joined their ranks. This contributed to the establishment of new acquaintances for Sora. And so, Sora realized that he now had something like his own courier department. It was a note in which the products were asked. The guild began to receive orders addressed to him. Sora loudly proclaimed the teams to open the status. The young man realized that the object can only be discovered with the help of thought. There was a condition panel before his eyes. The guy was delighted. Due to the level, it also expanded his knowledge of the status panel. The greater the Sora goes, the higher its level, and its assessment skill is improved due to constant use. Indications and number of skills points are also increased on a similar principle. Sora saw with noticeable pleasure that he had 15 points. He believed that this would be enough. Therefore, he decided to master a new skill. At the disposal of the guy there was a study of the following skills: the ability to possess force, blocking attacks, vision in the dark, strengthening of the body, healing magic, manipulation of magic forces, detection and skill in fencing. Sora thought that the skill of detection also seems tempting. However, he could not comprehend what the gradation blocking So, he decided that it would be better to keep his point, because he could not decide on the choice of skill. Leaving the hotel, Sora immediately saw a friendly mistress who was waiting for her. She asked the young man if he was well today. Sora replied that yes, everything was wonderful. It was the day the guy planned to leave the city. The guy mastered the following skills: VODL, 3 assessment, detection, strengthening of the body, simple sorcery, and manipulation of the first-level magic. Sora decided to choose 4 skills for himself. With the skill of detection, you are able to feel the presence of another person. Strengthening your body increases your strength, endurance, and agility at each level. Simple magic makes it possible to use elementary spells such as cleaning or fire. Magic manipulation allows you to effectively manage mana. It turned out that skills glasses can be used to increase the level of acquired abilities, but now Sora has skillfully improving them through their efforts. Sora realized that it was time to turn to the basics of magic. He tried to apply the magic of purification. At the same moment, all the traces of the old slight dirt from the boys disappeared without a trace. He was incredibly glad because the thing was new. Sora went to the Guild of Adventurers. Makaro told the boy that he would harvest plants. She noted that this was his first task outside the city, and asked every effort to succeed in this case. Makaro was interested in Sora, whether its equipment is effective enough for tasks, Sora thought, because he dreamed of receiving this order since yesterday. Mikaru warned the guy that the ominous dark forests, inhabited by monsters such as wolves and goblins, have spread out outside the city. So she advised him to arm himself well. Sora, in turn, assured that he would certainly acquire something useful. However, at this point, Siphon turned to him and asked if he had difficulty with the equipment. The man suggested that the boy show one place if he wanted, so Siphon and Sora went there. Siphon told the guy at the entrance to the building that the owner of this place is somewhat rough, but his equipment at height. Siphon congratulated the owner. It was a man with a smoking tube. Sora looked around and noted that many varied weapons were scattered around. Siphon told the owner that this little was going beyond the city, so he should be prepared for such a trip. Sora took 10 steps, and the store owner asked him what he was able to do. Sora replied that he really had no skills in any business, but he would like to get a sword or something else. The owner reflected and asked the boy to swing his sword, which he pointed. Sora agreed. Sora approached him, noting how thin and insignificant he was. It is today that he will have to hold a real sword for the first time. The guy lifted him and was quite surprised. Sora waved his sword madly. The owner warned him that it was only a poverty, and the guy was quite upset. The man said he had nothing to add. Beginners, such as he, should not leave the city at all. And if you really need to go from here, it would not hurt to bring with you a strong friend. The owner noted that the only weapon that suits him is a knife. Sora, disappointed and full of dissatisfaction, asked the man about why he just gave him a knife. However, the owner only asked the guy not to interfere in the case. Siphon explained Sora that all people were starting with this. He advised the guy to simply train and increase his level. Sora mentioned his level and said the team, "Open the status." The guy appeared in front of a status panel that pointed to his skills in owning a sword. Sora realized that he was dealing with something familiar. This is the art of fencing. The young man decided to grasp this art immediately. Sora's body enveloped a magical glow, and in a moment, everything froze. He was surprised to realize that it was all. Sora turned to the shopkeeper and asked if this sword could be tested. However, the owner called him a fool. He replied that he was indifferent because he could even afford to buy it if he wants. Sora grabbed the sword and raised him up. He began to ward the sword as if he had been holding him in his hands for the second time in his life. Everyone was surprised to look at the guy who seems to have not been able to believe in his new, unusual abilities. Sora asked the owner that he was thinking about his skills. The owner asked the guy if he only needed a weapon. Sora also replied that he also wanted to buy armor, or he has only 1 gold coin. The owner took it from the counter and left the boys. He asked Sora to wait from this place. Sora turned to the Siphon and wondered why he became angry with the owner. But Siphon assured her that it is not so, but vice versa. In a moment, the owner approached the boys, holding armor. He put it on the table so Sora could read. The owner noted that there was a sword, a bib, a knife, food stocks, handcuffs, and something. All this is quite suitable for such a strong man. Siphon tensed, remembering that it was the sword of the Holy Kingdom, a true rarity. Sora was extremely surprised and considered it impressive. The owner noted that although the blade is not sharpened too carefully, the shape is really great. He believes that for a guy, chaos will be perfect. The man asked the young man that it was a fashion to get cape from the elderly. It was necessary to demonstrate your power immediately. The owner also noted that the bib was made of dragon leather, which allows it to be safely worn under the cloak. The owner decided to support Sora for the last time, asking them to destroy everything around. These words sounded successfully in the soul of the Sora, and she agreed with the owner's plan. Sora and Siphon turned back, and the guy was enthusiastically observed that they were incredibly cool. He thanked the Siphon for the opportunity to see this place. Siphon replied to the boy that he now had beer. He decided to join his group and wish Sora good luck. They said goodbye to each other. Sora stopped at the gate leading beyond the city and thought about it. For the first time, this young man will pass through the gate to leave the royal capital. He challenges nature, begging it to wait for it. The security guard addressed Sora and asked if he was going to go out. In this case, he needs to present a certificate. Sora presented his card and thought in his head. Now he is a real adventurer, so it is worth holding on accordingly. With confidence and courage, the guard checked the map of Sora and returned her guy, assuring that everything was fine and he could pick it up. Sora carefully inspected the garden and sincerely thanked him. However, the guard laughed and reassured the guy. He advised Sora to be careful with monsters and poisonous plants in those parts. The guard ordered the gate to open for them, and right in front of him, the gates began to dissolve slowly. Sora was hopeful that he may finally be able to leave the capital. An incredible panorama of the mountains opened in front of him. Sora felt the bright sunlight warms it, and a warm breeze brings a pleasant aroma. On his belt, he hung a sword and also a set of fresh hope. The young man climbed to the top of the hill and felt that a whole new world was opened in front of him. You smiled happy and placed on the grass. The guy confessed that he was still a little tired of running. It seems that his ability to act immediately for the company is effective only when walking. Sora stretched on the grass and decided to rest with pleasure. Today's adventure was to harvest healing herbs. It takes about an hour from the capital to the collection. Medicinal herbs needed Sora and are indispensable ingredients for potion. The guy felt excitement, realizing that his experience was mostly limited to transportation. If, however, the map he was in his hands did not deceive, then the Sora is quite near the right place. The guy considered the plants carefully, thinking about how many varieties of herbs exist, but he could not determine which of them had healing properties. Sora remembered his skills and was convinced that they would help in this situation. Sora used his ability to evaluate plants. In front of him, many medicinal herbs of different quality were spread. Ordinary, good, and excellent. Between them, you could see the grass of the full moon and fake medicinal plants. Sora chose one of the herbs of the highest quality, explaining that this approach to assessment takes into account not only the appearance, but also the quality. It was an ideal skill for such a task. He actually became an expert in the collection of herbs. Sora learned that quality herbs are the key to creating the best potions. He decided to apply his ability to evaluate and collect only those plants that are of the highest quality. Sora found that many such herbs grew there, and it brought him great joy. The guy recalled that the grass of the full moon and the mana are elsewhere. However, he decided that he was here. It was worth gathering. During this time, it has been past for an hour, and Sora collected a large bag of potion. He decided that he would be enough for him, but his back pain became almost unbearable. Sora opened the panel of his status and gladly found that his ability to evaluate and strengthen the body had reached a new level. The assessment skill has reached the 4th level, and the strength of body strengthening has risen to the 2nd level. The guy believes that it happened because he took advantage of the assessment skill when he collected grass. Suddenly, Sora heard, as behind his back, just from the bushes, scary sounds came up. The guy turned and realized that he had forgotten to activate the skill of detection. Sora grabbed the sword and asked who was hiding in the bushes. Because of the bushes, a creature that resembled a rabbit jumped into the boy. The guy was quite surprised by the situation and could not understand what was happening. He believed it was the sweetest creature in the world. However, the creature was upset and began to make sad sounds. The guy asked what happened to her. Sora decided that probably the creature was hungry. The guy opened his backpack, asking the creation to wait a moment. He was convinced that he had stocks in a backpack, so he pulled it out. Sora was interested in creating whether she wanted to get a piece of food soldering. The creature swallowed the soldering. Sora was moved to the heart and noted that the creature eats so cute. Since then, the guy began to watch her carefully. This creature tried to keep a good mood at least for a moment, but immediately upset. With his breath, Sora turned to the creature, asking what happened to her. The guy decided to taste the rations on his own, and later noted that his taste was frankly horrible. Sora apologized to the creature for sharing such trouble with him. She did not even know that a rabbit could have such tastes. But before the guy had time to finish, the creature suddenly broke out of place. he was extremely surprised and was convinced that the creature had flew. The creature began to swing around Sora, and the guy realized that she probably wanted to say that everything was fine with him. It caused him laughter, and he sincerely thanked the charming creation. Suddenly, the creature landed and comfortably settled on his head. The young man turned to the creature and asked if he wanted to go with him. The creature unambiguously showed that yes, she seeks to go with Sora. It moved the guy, and he thought that the creature was extremely sweet. Sora finally decided that they would now be together, and it caused true joy in creating. Sora introduced himself to the creature and expressed his hope for good relations with her. Suddenly, the guy has experienced a feeling that he had never felt before. The young man realized that this is how his ability to detect his ability. Sora noticed that 6 objects were approaching from the south. Sora jumped in numbness, feeling that they were already close. He was covered by fear, and the guy decided that the only right action was an escape. Suddenly, people, along with several creatures, rushed to the guy. The girls bravely opposed the monsters, trying to destroy them. White wolves are rapidly rushing to the girls, causing them to a dead end. The girls clearly looked tense and intimidated. It was striking. Sora immediately realized, these girls just attacked wolves. The girls were in the full surroundings of a flock of wolves, and desperately tried to cope with these insurers. There was so much monster that it was not possible to cope with them. The Sora is located just in front of them, stopping to understand the situation. She guessed that the girls were here and fought courageously with the wolves on their own. He looked carefully at these girls' clothes, and concluded that their equipment indicates that they were adventurers. He also noticed that they were all injured. One of the girls turned to her girlfriend Chris and asked her to go back. Sora noted that one of the girls has 2 sabers, but holding the wolf powerful only with one hand. It was a lot of impressed by the guy. But the second girl most likely was a witch, but looked tired because she did not take an active part in battle. The young man remembered that in the main hall of the guild he read about the wolves of this world. They are incredibly fast, but if you are able to control their mobility, then you can hope for success. Sora noted that the first girl acted agilely and lightly attacked wolves. However, there were so many that she could not cope. The young man realized that they undoubtedly had serious problems. Sora looked at the girls and felt how hard he was looking at it. He was aware that because of fatigue, they simply would not be able to cope with these monsters. Although the girl with the sword protects the magician, their death is only a matter of time. Sora was faced with a choice of how to proceed. If he dares to help these exhausted girls, he can be a victim of deadly embrace white wolves himself. Sora recalled that in his 15 years he had never participated in any battle. What to do now? Sora grabbed his sword and decided that he should now come to the aid of these girls. Again, one of the white wolves rushed at a girl armed with 2 swords. She tried to defend herself, putting both blades in front of her. The white wolf struck such a powerful blow that forced the girl to lose one sword. It caused her a lot of fear. He fell immediately behind the girls among the wolves, so they had no chance of grabbing him. The girl is lost and does not know how to proceed and how to cope with wolves. But suddenly she noticed another threat. 2 wolves rushed to the girls almost instantly. Their hearts have been horrified by the unexpected development of events. At that moment, Sora stood, watching the girls. He considered it complete nonsense. He hugged cold paralysis, and his heart was crazy as never before. One of the wolves was rapidly approaching the girls, but suddenly his sword stopped. The blade shook a white predator's mouth, and he could no longer threaten the girls. The girls were in full surprise, not realizing what really happened. The smile shone on the face of Sora when he managed to put his sword into the monster's mouth. The wolf fell to the ground and instantly got to action. Sora's eyes expanded from shock when he realized that he had killed a white wolf himself. One of the girls suddenly turned, staring interested and looking at the man who saved them. But then, returning to the monster, she hit 2 wolves with one steep movement of the sword. Their bodies broke into 2 parts. When the pale wolf was almost attached to the girl, she cleverly walked away. Because of this, the predator raced past her. The girl turned to Sora and apologized to him, explaining that the wolf was to blame. And so, the white wolf rushed directly at the guy. The Sora of the auditors, realizing that such frenzy can turn into death at the same moment. Now Sora could not realize that he had to come together in battle with this white wolf, but still threw the sword. The wolf was approaching, and his panic grew every moment. Sora looked away and saw a girl's sword that lay nearby. He recalled that it was one of her 2 blades. The Sora suddenly shifted to the side and waved his hand to the sword, but the wolf had already made it close. The guy realized that he only had a few seconds. Either he has time to grasp the sword and strike, or die. Sora immediately reacted and sharply roared the sword directly into his stomach. The guy suddenly began to tremble with excitement, and his body covered the trees. Sora was aware of what he had done. The young man was horrified by the realization that he managed to overcome the white wolves and save the girls who were in trouble. The girls immediately rushed to Nosh. The guy was exhausted and just couldn't believe what happened to him. The girls were delighted with Sora because he saved them, and they sought to thank him. The girl with 2 swords reached out to the boy and confessed that only because of him they both remained alive. She sincerely expressed gratitude for his support. Her girlfriend, the sorceress, barely kept on her feet and told the young man that they were saved. After all this situation, Sora also felt great tension. She extended her hand to the boy. He answered her the same, stretching out. The 2 swords warrior approaches Sora and helps him get out of the ground. The girl introduced herself, reporting that her name is Rukrek. From now on, they are familiar. The magical girl confessed that her name was Chris. Sora also decided to introduce himself to girls. In response, the boy Chris and Marika gave him gentle smiles. Despite the grueling battle, Ruriko has not lost its strength. She suggested that the boy start processing wolves until they began to deteriorate. Sora looked at the girls. He had never had an animal dismantling before, and it was a new experience for him. So, Rebecca reported Sora that they were already starting to cut wolves. Rukrek took the initiative and first started processing a white wolf. She acted calmly and with confidence, as if performing a long-known business. But the girl, looking at the boy, noticed that he became very bad immediately after she broke the wolf belly. Rurika asked the guy what had happened to him. Sarah apologized to the girl, explaining that only recently became an adventurer, so she was not used to this way of life. Rukorea wondered the guy, which means that he was beating for the first time, but had already had time to deal with 2 wolves. Thinking a little, Sora sighed and said that he was just his luck. Despite this, the hands of the Sora continued to tremble, and the alarm did not leave him. After all, the guy had just deprived his life as a true creature, and he could not just cope with it. But suddenly something broke into it, and his mood changed dramatically. He began to laugh ominously. Sora was thinking about what had just happened to him. He suggested that it may have been admiration. The guy realized that it was this feeling that he experienced when he killed a white wolf. In the end, he, without realizing it, threw the sword right in the direction of the beast. Sora was a little upset, thinking that it does not look like him at all. He could not understand what was happening to him and why he treated so strangely. Rukrera turned to Sora, asking him to be less concerned with this business. She suggested showing him how to properly process carcasses. Rukrek noted that the meat of monsters costs a considerable amount, so it is very profitable for them. The exhausted Chris gathered his last strength and came to the Rooks, offering her help because Sora has never done it. However, Rukrek replied that she was not very tired, and now she needs to rest. Rukrek began to explain to the boy that the ability to disassemble monsters into pieces is an extremely important component of the adventure seeker's life. This means that he will now have to make considerable effort. Sora agreed with her words and focused on work. The girl noted that at first the young man had to get all the organs. Sora thought that while Ruriko taught him how to disassemble an animal carcass, their conversation switched to discussing a variety of terms. The girl told the boy that Rukarek and Chris were forming a team of adventurers of rank D. Today, they were tasked with gathering honey from hazardous bees. But when the girls approach the hive, they notice a flock of white wolves nearby. After that, Chris came into battle with monsters, and they were able to evade most wolves with the help of magic. However, Chris would not have enough mana to stop all the animals. Ruraka recalled the moment of her trip from Saro, and the tension still mastered it. While the boys were processing wolves, Rurika expressed her interest in what punishment was waiting for them for failure to fulfill the order for honey. At that moment, when Sora had already calmed down, his gaze attracted his clothes on his hand. The guy suggested that she was about his age, but could not determine if the outfit was too frank. Rurika noticed how Sora looked at the girl's clothes carefully, and asked the boy where he was, so staring. Sora suddenly agitated and immediately turned away from the girl. He hastily assured her that he did not really look at anything and no one. Rurika smiled, charming the boy, and came close to him. It was a lot of puzzling, and his face was instantly blossomed. The young man turned away from the girl, and Ruka asked the Sora which happened to him. Sora, feeling the inconvenience, insecurely replied that no, nothing had happened. The young man drove a knife in a white wolf's carcass, trying to convince himself that his thoughts about his Rurik are not worried now. Better yet, you do not think about anything at all. Chris also watched this guy, and thought it was extremely interesting for her. At this point, Rukek pulled one of the organs from the body of a white wolf and turned to Sora. She explained that it is a magic stone, which is usually located somewhere near the heart. This part of the beast is of high value. Sora looked at this part of the wolf and felt nausea again. His face faded, and he squeezed his mouth with his hand. Rukek noticed his condition and asked, alarmed, how he feels, but Sora could no longer answer her. After a while, the boys laid down the parts of the white wolves that they managed to get. The results were the results of the Rooks. Everything was very carefully cut. On the left there was a work of Sora, which had the appearance that it was even difficult to look at it. Sora was in full despair due to the results obtained. The guy was upset and called himself nothing more than just worthless. As always, the relentless optimistic Rukek answered the boy that everything was fine. After all, practice is needed by everyone, and over time it will surely become better and better. Rukrera said the boy that now all had to put all the organs in the bag. Suddenly, Sora dared to take the initiative and asked the girl if he could do it himself. Rurika and Chris looked at him in surprise. Sora used his ability to clean. Everything around the guy began to clean themselves, including girls' clothes, freely from blood and dirt. Rukrek and Chris were amazed at how he coped with all this mess in just a few seconds. Sora smiled soap to the girls and reported that everything was ready now. They became completely clean. The river enthusiastically noted that all the dirt disappeared from their clothes. Two girls sincerely thanked the boy for his help. Rurek was delighted that Sora had the skill of cleaning. It seemed incredible to her because few people have this skill. Sora was a little discordant and asked for Rooks, whether it was true. Sarah was thinking about how little he knew that her cleansing skill is a rare magic among people. He decided that it was better not to tell anyone about it. In the meantime, the guy started collecting things. Sora carefully fixed everything on his backpack. Rurika was amazed that the guy was able to collect all their things together. She asked if he was sure that he wanted to pick it up and carry it on her shoulders. Sora replied that yes, it was his luggage, and for him it does not cause any difficulty. Sora effortlessly picked up a backpack and immediately thrown on his shoulders. He told the girls that it was time to go to the capital. Sora was walking towards the city when he suddenly remembered his new friend. The guy stopped and turned, trying to see him among the grass. Sora realized that he was absent here, which meant that he went somewhere else. Sora turned towards the capital and reflected on the fact that, despite all the trials he encountered, his first trip outside the city was quite successful. The girls went with the boy, and Sora noted that the road was surprisingly calm. Soon Sora and the girls got the capital and immediately went to the Adventurers Guild. There they were happy to meet the smiling Makaro, greeting the river and Chris. But then she pointed out that Sora came with them. Rukrera replied that he returned with them. The girl added that they accidentally encountered when executing the order. Rarika poured the whole catch on the Makar table, saying that he intended to sell the meat of this wolf. Mika Rua was amazed, seeing the mountain of meat, and noted that there were too many. The girl began to disassemble the meat bags and look carefully at the prey. Makura wondered the guys, which needed this bag for processing. Because they brought a lot of meat, this garbage was disposed of for free. As soon as Sora heard about the garbage, his muscles were instantly straining. All the girls watched the guy with interest. Rukrera tried to cheer him up, and Makar realized that it was an integral aspect of his personality. Sora decided to pour the contents of a large bag with a Makar table, and he reported that they also managed to find a considerable bunch of healing herbs. The girl could not hold back the delight from fulfilling their orders. Sora, however, noted for himself that he was not quite accustomed to all this. Meanwhile, Makar loaded all the meat on a visa and reported that they had coped with this task. Makaru wondered in girls, which happened to order on the B sword. Rukek from Chris was immediately upset and began to apologize to Makaro. The girls explained to the administrator that they could not get honey. Rurika explained that the reason was the wolves in the area, which is why they failed to fulfill the order. All members of the guild immediately turned towards the girls, holding their breath away from surprise. At that moment, Sora thought about why all this noise rose. The man with the monoclam went forward, heading to the group. Mikaru was quite surprised when a guildmaster appeared in front of her. The man returned to his Rurek and assured her that they were not lying. The monster really stand on the doorstep of the royal capital. Sora and girls from Tanstope. The guildmaster noted with indignation that wolves had never been seen in this forest, and because of this he was chosen for beginners. He then strongly reported that he convenes urgent fees, which all the leaders of the detachment with a rank of not lower than B. All members of the guild turned to the master. Guildmaster returned to Maikar and asked her to inform other guilds and the castle itself about what happened. The girl without hesitation agreed to fulfill this assignment. The head of the guild looked at the boys and advised them to be careful when they went outside. A little later, the boys left the guild. Sora returned to the girls and noted that it sounds extremely important. Ririka agreed, adding that she could not predict what kind of stratification it would cause. Suddenly, a smile shone on the girl's face. She confessed that she was joyful because they were able to sell the meat. Sora, holding a piece of meat in his hands, explained to the girls that he could not accept part of the board, since Mikaru did not buy what he cut off. However, Rorika assured him that everything was fine. He coped with half the wolves, so he deserves a reward. Rurika wondered the guy if he would like to put their company for dinner, because she had a desire to discuss with him something important. The girl reported that there is a restaurant nearby where food is being prepared with what you bring with you. She suggested that Sora visit this establishment and bring her pieces of meat. Hearing this, Sora asked what he was interested in what this place was there, and gladly agreed to the proposal. The boys said goodbye, and Rurik noted that they would change. They agreed to meet again in the same place tonight. The girls departed from the boy, and Riruk, turning to Chris, wondered why they were silent. What Chris suggested that she may have sympathy for him. Suddenly Chris escaped and ran away from his Rurik. The girl tried to stop her, but Chris did not think to return. Sora watched as the girls were going, and thought about what they could talk about. It seemed to him that they were associated with a very close friendship. The guy suggested that they had their own team. Sora did not lose hope that its characteristics would improve. Sora said whether it was possible to be in one team with them in this case. After a short reflection, Sora decided to go to the hotel. That evening, the boys gathered again and went to the restaurant. Sora, seeing a lot of dishes, asked the girls if the chefs really cooked it all from his meat. Rukrera replied that the local chef is a real god of cooking. Chris later confirmed her words, adding that they sometimes attend the institution. Chris watched how Sora eats, and she had a desire to say something to him. However, she never spoke a word. Rukek noticed the girl's indecision. Rukrera tasted the dish and delighted with delight that the taste was unsurpassed. Sora joined her, noting that the boss had transformed unnecessary into a true work of art. The guy wondered what he was talking like a real restaurant critic. Rukrera laughed, happily noting that she was pleased that he liked the dishes. The girl wondered in Sora, that is why he knew nothing about this place, that he was not local. Sora finished chewing and replied that he could be said. Their country is so far from here that they are unlikely to understand something with its name. Rukare asked a man who pushed him to choose the path of the adventure, so I replied that everything that happened in his life contributed to this. However, in this world, he seeks to bypass all obstacles. This is his main dream. The girls looked at the boy with surprise. Chris stated that he had a great job. Rorka noted that in this case they also travel different countries, so their stop will be delayed a little longer. The girls were silently exchanging their views, feeling mutual understanding, and decided to ask a guy a question. The girls asked for Sora, whether he wanted to join their team. The young man wondered in the girls, which is included in their detachment. Sora confessed that he could not even imagine this, given his E level. It will only be an unnecessary burden for them. Sora expressed confidence that they will be able to find adventurers much stronger than him. The ruler answered the affirmative, but noted that they were familiar only one day. However, for girls, he seemed truly sincere. He did not try to show himself stronger than he really was, and Sora does not hesitate to act when it is needed. Rurika noted that is why he can be considered an honest person. In any case, they would like to travel with him. Chris interrupted her Rurik and noted that she wanted to express these thoughts. Sora thanked the girls and expressed gratitude for what they think. The Sora cleverly jumped off the table and asked the girls to take care of him. Rukaria laughed fun and asked him to return to take care of them. Sora asked the girls that they were talking about travel. Then he asked where they came from. Rukrek replied that they came from the Republic of Eldo. The girl feels that this place is not the best for their life. Sora thought about the Republic of Eldo. During the public discussion, he learned that he was one of 7 countries in this world. Judging by the books he viewed in the guild, the world is divided into 7 countries. The stubborn supporters of the idea of humanity, who purposefully spread their xenophobia, are the Barshla Empire. Less radical than Boshale, but partially upholding people's superiority, is the Kingdom of Alicia. The Republic of Eldo is a multinational state that thrives through mutual respect. There is also a kingdom of beasts ruled by the King of Beasts. There is a sacred kingdom where countless fortune is stored, which are faithful to the goddesses. European Federation of Associations magicians shape prominent researchers and magicians, and royal fans of rifle are fond of dragons. In the world, 7 powerful countries have been enjoying peace for a long time. However, 10 years ago, the The Republic of Borshali declared war on the Republic of Eldor, but the war covered all 7 countries, and after all, the war has devastated the whole world. However, the nuns of the Holy Kingdom Fraulina argued that their goddess appeared to them with a revelation that the demonic king was revived. To combat hordes of monsters, 7 great powers have concluded a truce. Even now, they are glowing in the dark forest, so as not to stop their attacks on 2 neighboring countries. Sora could not get rid of the idea that these girls belonged to the ancient republic. The guy noted that everything happened because of the war. Rukur said their village was destroyed. To survive, they are forced to go on the road and look for a job. In the 10th step, the guy thought about how much they survived when they were in another country. It was actually impressive for him. Returning to the girls, he assured that he was ready to do everything possible to help them in any situation. Rukek from Chris were delighted with heard words and smiled gently with the guy. The girls sincerely thanked Sora for his support. Rukrera turned to Sora and asked him if he had any plans for tomorrow. Sora first planned to simply carry the goods in the city, but when he came across girls, suddenly replied that he had free time. Rurika noted that it was incredible. The girl noted that there was something she would like to do with him. Her face suddenly gained a tricky expression. Sora was more and more worried about this, so he asked the girl asking what it was about. After a hearty dinner, the boys dispersed in their business, and the next day, they all gathered in the Guild of Adventures. In the large hall stood Sora and Rorik, everyone with their sword in their hands. A crowd gathered around people who were loudly incited by a Rorik to kill a guy. Someone in the crowd even put 3 copper on a girl. Rurika's face expressed such a determination that she was ready to destroy everything around. It scared the boy to the heart, and he asked the girl what she thought. Rukrek replied that she was constantly returning to the battle with the wolves during which they met. The girl remembered how he acted during the battle. His movements were inept. He did not think about the accuracy of the wolves. Sora became even more passionate, confident in her assumptions. He only possessed the ability to weapon. The guy began to tremble nervously, assuming that the battle would unfold right now. Rukurea turned to Sora, noting that the duel at this point would be useful for everyone. Sora tried to reassure the girl and convey her look, but Rukare only replied that now is not time to talk. Rukrek jumped from the seat and went to the guy. Rua could jump up to attack the enemy from the air, but realized that he was being troubled. Rorshi suddenly decided to arrange a fighting training for the boy. She rapidly attacked him, but Sora managed to repel the blow, holding his sword in front of him. Although it was one of his first battles, the guy tried to hold his position. Rukrek was full of energy to attack the guy continuously. She insisted that the Sora finally began to contradicate the girl, because only he could not defend himself forever. However, Sora did not answer her with words or strokes, because his attention was fully focused on observing the shaky movements of his hand. Sora was convinced that at the same time she struck 2 swords, but the boy still managed to note that the girl's back was unprotected. Sora aimed his sword directly on the girl, getting ready to strike her. The young man thought that thanks to his skillful possession of the sword, the blade listened to his orders and was moving exactly where he wanted. Zarurik made a sharp blow to the sword, aiming at the boy. But the girl cleverly took the second sword behind her back, not allowing him to impress her body. Looking for a way out of the situation, Sora was amazed at the girl's wit. However, he was not disappointed with the fact that his plan was still collapsing. Sora was surprised by the result of the battle. She thought that instead of attacking the opponent with both hands, as she first planned, Rurika used one to protect. Rukurek decided to neutralize her opponent. She struck, after which she was able to grab his sword and throw it up. Marking a true skill, Sori's sword described some sophisticated circles in the air before he broke down rapidly. Immediately then, the guy's sword with a deft knock fell on the floor behind him. He remained unarmed. All present in the hall were amazed at how the events of this battle unfolded. In the hopelessness of Sora, he dropped to the floor, despairing. His mind sorted all the details, astonishing how incredible it was. Sora realized that he faced the level of D. Now he realized for sure how much the Rurik had great potential and strength. Rukek returned to Sora and noted that he had actually sufficient speed, but she provided all his actions. The girl praised the boy for trying to strike her behind. However, she noted that his strange movements had given him head. Ruraki praised the guy for how skillfully he was fighting. Suddenly, a boyfriend flew past her cell. The guy instantly expanded his eyes from surprise when he saw him in this place. Sora turned to the creature and said that it was her creature from the forest. The river looked at the boy with suspicion and wondered what he was trying to say. But Sora himself realized that only he seems to see Klull. Foka flew right in front of the guy. Seeing his cry froze on his lips. Sora returned to Kel and wondered what was worried about the creature. Kel clearly made it clear that this was the cause of his concern. Suddenly, Kel was instantly disappeared from the guy's field of view. Sora was amazed at such a surprise. Sora sat on the floor and slowly turned his head in different directions, trying to find Ciel. At this time, Chris approached Rurik and asked her not to beat the guy so cruelly. Ruraki wanted to answer that she did not plan to bring to this in any way. It was really important for her that everything was fine with Sora. She turned to the boy and asked if he had all well. Ruhorka addresses the guy with a proposal. Not he mind to take an order for the whole detachment for a training session? At this point, Siphon approached Rurika and asked her what she was going to spoil for him. The girl Cute replied that it was just a preparation for battle. Cross believed that Siphon came to save him. After a while, the girls from Sora came to a huge tasks. Rurika advised Sori, which in order to travel the world, he needs to become stronger. The hike can be a real test for them and be quite dangerous. Sora was surprised to address the girl, asking what she meant when she remembered the hike. Rurika was surprised when she learned that the young man had never broken the camp before. Sora was enthusiastically answered the girl, who really had no such opportunity. The guy thought about what adventures were waiting for him during the night. He had never dared to be similar before, therefore, he was engaged in great excitement. Russia looked at the task and noted that in this case, the journey from the city to the place of residence of the goblin would take 3 days. It will be the perfect beginning for the first hike. The girl said Sori that he would be able to improve his sword skills. Sora answered Rukek that, although he is satisfied, they belong to a where is the highest class than this pathetic order. The head answered the boy so that he would think that it was their expression of gratitude for help in the forest then. And in addition, a considerable remuneration was provided for this task. Sora was extremely satisfied and expressed their gratitude for the girls for their help and support. Rurika turned to Sora and showed him a sheet. She noted that when accepting a long-distance orders similar to that, they should be ready to spend a lot of time on the road. The girl noted that the path to the village of Reynos would take them for 3 days, and then they will have to go back for 3 more days. So now you need to prepare provisions and medicines in advance for all 6 days. Rukrek noted that the reward for this task is quite significant, so they will be able to cover the costs. The girl tried to convey to the boy how important it is for them to consider such moments. The girl asked the boy to go to the store and buy everything you need to tomorrow to go on the road. Sora answered the girls with a smile. The guy was delighted with a future trip to camping, and Sori seemed difficult for him to believe it, but the discussion was incredibly exciting. At this time, Sora went to the hotel, where Ollie stopped. Next to his bed lay a small bag that contained everything necessary for the trip, both stocks and medicines. Sora was lying on the bed, conceived that tomorrow they would all go on a trip. The young man hoped that everything would go according to the plan because 3 of them, but still worried about it. Sora opened his eyes, feeling that his dream was overlooked because of anxiety, which did not rest. It reminded him of a child who could not wait for a school excursion. Suddenly something fluffy appeared in front of the guy right before his eyes. Seeing that it was Kiel, Sora was frightened and shouted in surprise. Sora thoughtfully turned to a creature who flew to him again. Apparently she continues to watch him. Sora smiled and thanked Seal for watching him closely. Seal, like a real guard, hung just over the guy. Sora raised his hands, turning to the creature, and asked Ciel if he could hear him. Sora tried to touch the creature, but now his hand went straight through it, as if through air. The creature was noticeably worried. Sora was incredibly surprised by this, and the guy imagined that his hand just walked through his body. The seal was pulled, inflating, and began to sway from side to side. Ciel was still angry and turned away from Sora. The guy apologized to the creature. Sora tried to explain to Ciel that he looked so fluffy, so that is why the guy wanted to touch him. However, Sora confessed to the SL, which is pleased to see him now. The man began to mute the words and slowly closed his eyes. Sora was dorming, and Kul neatly descended from the sky, lying next to the guy. So, they both fell asleep with each other. The best medicine is a friend who can be hugged. And finally, the long-awaited Sora campaign began. The girls gathered at the entrance, where Rukarek looked to the sky. She noted that the morning seemed great for the hike. All things Aruk and Chris were neatly folded into a joint backpack that carried their companion. But Sora could not forget this night. He constantly mentioned Kul and could not get rid of the idea that, having waking up in the morning, it is a sweet creature no longer. He sincerely sought to meet this creature again. The guards noticed that several people approached the city and asked them to present documents. The guys handed over their passes to the guard, and he considered them carefully. The document stated that among them there are 2 fighters of rank D and 1 rank E. The guard decided to warn them, assuming that they were already aware of the latest events in this forest. He advised them to be careful. The young man is confident in the guard. Yes, they know about it and try to be careful. They were not afraid of monsters who roam outside the city. The guard addressed the boys, urging them to enjoy the time there. Finally, he wished them luck. With full support of the guard, adventurers began their journey. At this time, Sora, considering the map, said that their journey to the village would last 3 days. This may have been influenced by the monsters that appeared at the place of collection of healing herbs. However, it has been 2 hours as the boys were on the road, and during this time, they have not met any person. Friends walked a narrow path surrounded by huge fields. Sora, noticing the plants near the road, stopped to see them closer. Sora imagined a field with a soft grass, where he was so hard to dive. Looking at the girls, he realized that they came here for the sake of him, and could not afford to waste their time on such little things. Rukaria saw that the Sora was silently looked at the field covered with plants. She suddenly realized that Sora was conceived, and without delay, she plunged into a soft field. The girl began to whirling there, which was a lot of surprise to the Christopher and Sori, who did not expect such an unexpected act. However, the Rurik was really delighted, lying in the grass. The girl turned to the boys and enthusiastically said that they should definitely try it. It was incredibly great for her. Sora was extremely happy, and of course burned to take up this, but Chris looked at Rukek with disbelief in his eyes. However, in a moment, 3 young men stretched on soft grass. Luck. They realized that there was an incredibly beautiful sky above them. Satisfied, Rurika reached out, noting that today is just a wonderful day and they were incredibly lucky enough to get a campsite this time. But suddenly Rurik disappeared from the field of view of the boys because she rolled over a small hill. The girl shouted to a falling companion, and in the sounds of her voice, it was clear that she was in some swamp. A moment later, she looked carefully from behind the hill. All her appearance was dirty and nervous. She told the boys of unbearable pain. Sora and Chris were alert, noticing Ruarek. Rukrek confessed that she was very awkward when the boys saw her in that condition. However, Sora immediately suggested that this problem was solved. He used his skills of cleaning, and in an instant, all the contaminated things were shown with cleanliness. Chris smiled gently, looking at the boys, but did not resist, and noted Sori that it was indeed excessively incapable of mana. Sora decided to check his indicators by opening the status window, and in fact, everything was the way he thought. When using simple magic, the new moon spends magical glasses. It surprised him well. The young man has already mastered such skills as simple magic, evaluation, detection, strengthening of the body, and possession of the sword. Sora wondered that after having perfectly acquired these skills, he would realize that there are different types of skills. These are the skills that MP magical energy uses, those that involve the spiritual power of the SP, as well as those that do without resources at all. Using simple magic, Sora spends magical energy points, ME. Since skills such as evaluation and perception are active skills, their use spends SPI. The ability to strengthen the body and skill of possession of the sword belong to passive skills, so they do not require the cost of MP or SP. This man believes that MP is related to magical skills, and SP is more suitable for tasks that require endurance or focus. Therefore, the SP level is also important. Sora was also convinced that if you try to apply the skill after complete exhaustion of the scale of MR or SP, then the person simply loses consciousness. The guy even personally tested it in his own experience. However, there is one small detail. When the Sora goes, his skills are not spent by JV. Sora believed that that is why he was constantly keeping the detection active. The young man believes that SP is similar to the endurance scale, and while walking he does not feel tired. Although, if the Sora decides to apply 2 or more abilities at once, SP will start spending. For example, this will be when using identification and evaluation skills. However, in any case, it proved to be useful for Sora. The guy was delighted with what he had such skills. Sora believed that this ability was truly amazing, just a miracle. At that moment, Ruer saw some wonderful butterflies circling over the grass. She was fascinated with them and said aloud, "Which only you would not find the treasure here." The girl noted that they were so bright. She asked Sora and Chris whether they were butterflies. Sora decided to understand and took advantage of his ability to analyze the situation. He appeared in front of him that it is a flying herbal insect. It is a plant that comes from their kingdom Alicia, and it looks like an insect, although it is actually a plant. In the core of this plant, there is a fragrant nectar that can be sucking through a tube. Wing-like petals can also be eaten. Sora was amazed by this news. She thought it was not butterflies, but real plants that still produce honey. This young man could not wait for the opportunity to try honey, so Sora turned to the girls, offering them to join the treat. Sora pointed to the object and explained that it was not an insect, but a plant. He learned about it from what he read. Inside the plant you can find honey. The guy asked in the Rooks and Chris whether they wanted to taste. Chris was thinking about what she really wanted. However, despite this, her face was a blush, and she shyly lowered her head. Rukek noticed this and turned to Chris, saying that she was not particularly sweet, but she is delighted with him. Chris tried to speak again, but the words never broke from his lips. As a result, the boys became fascinated by this fantastic plant. Rukrek and Chris completed the task for the first time, and Sori had to catch up with them. Rukrek decided to ask again to the Saurus whether it was possible to use this tube to suck honey that inside. Sora confirmed that it was, and all three began to eat honey juice from the plant. The guy felt his eyes shone, because the taste was quite unusual and surprisingly pleasant. Sora noted that the food is sweet, and it feels fruit shades in it. Rurika with delight noted that it was just great. Due to the freshness, the bitterness is not felt at all, and the Christ noted that the aroma is extremely pleasant. Rurika turned to Sora and wondered if it was possible to eat the wing of this plant. The guy replied that in his opinion, it was edible. Rurika informed the boys that in her opinion, it was time to rest a little. The girl decided to cook the dish from what they caught, Chris wondered. And even Sora was a little surprised by the girl's idea. It will be their first dinner while camping together. The boys gladly went for dinner in nature, and Rukarer had fun exclaiming that it is time to take the case. Sora supported her initiative, noting that they would prepare something special and delicious now. But suddenly, the Rurk's face changed dramatically, and she stated that at first they would take his wings from this creature. From these wings, she plans to prepare a salad. Sora was embarrassed after these words, and he replied to the girls that although it was only plants, he still seemed to be doing the wrong. However, Rook and Chris were absolutely calm, and without hesitation began to tear the wings from these plants. The girls had 3 years of experience in hunting monsters. In the end, the boys finished breaking their wings and got a wonderful herbal salad. Sora was the first to taste this salad. Chewing herbal insects, he was enthusiastically told the girls that the dish is incredibly tasty. Chris and Rukurek also decided to try this dish. Sora noted that she crumbles pleasantly, has a refreshing sweet and acidic taste. The guy thought of comparison and realized that the dish resembles a fruit. Rurika and Chris continued to eat salad, and Rurika asked her to stop because it was delicious. Rurika expressed the opinion that it is better not to cook this dish at all. The girl had many culinary designs, and she suggested spreading it on bread or served as a major dish. But suddenly the eyes of River expanded with fear, and she exclaimed, "Oh my God!" Right in front of the boys, a cow suddenly appeared, which grazed peacefully on the grass. Sora used his ability to evaluate, and learned that a black cow was in front of him. It was a common species of a wild cow. Rurik immediately woke up the morale, and she decisively ordered Chris to go to business. Chris agreed with her and assured that she understood it. He alarmed, noticing the girl behaving with the cow, and looked at them inquirically. The guy thought they were planning to do with her. Sora could not understand where the girls had so much cruelty, however. They were already in a hurry to the cow. Chris began to reveal her magical abilities, and Rukek rushed to the upper floors. After a short pause, Sora noted that the cow peacefully lay on the grass and slept calmly, until Chris was gently holding her hand on her wool. At this point, Rukurek lifted a small bowl and began to milk a cow to get milk. Sora felt disappointment and immediately realized that the girls sought only to get milk from this cow, and did not intend to destroy it at all. He approached the girls and confessed that it seemed to him that they had planned her murder. Rui and Chris reacted laughing at these words. Rurika decided to explain to the young man that in fact the thing is not only that the murder is terrible. The girls adhered to the principle not to resort to the edge if there was no extreme need. Chris supported Rurik in this matter. Rukurek noted that in this situation they only need milk. She does not understand what to kill a cow. Sora heard the girls and replied that he now understood everything. The guys went in search of food again. After they came across a cow, they were lucky to find several bird eggs. Sora decided to evaluate the prey and found that these eggs were transparent. More precisely, their shell glowed with transparency. The guys decided to cook another dish from it. At first, they knocked milk and eggs together, and then added nectar of herbal insects. After that, the boys dipped the bread into this mixture and left it to insist. While the bread was absorbed by the sauce, the Rurik took the mowing of the grass, and then they began to dig a pit in this place. In a small pit, the boys ignited a campfire, and Sora lit a fire. After that, Sora took the same frying pan that his uncle with the grill gave him, set it on fire, and poured oil. They grabbed this oil from the last camping trip. Sora carefully began to spread slices of bread with spices and oil. And then they received a truly appetizing dish, which was called tavernistic toast. They were served with herbal leaves and syrup. Sora, inhaling the aroma of his toast, noted that he smells great. And then he thought that this other world is really incredible, because there are many different and innovative things. Roshika shared with Sora that they had just prepared something like a cookie. The girls mixed honey, milk, and flour to create it. Sora was delighted with their ingenuity and praised them, calling steep. The boys were comfortable on a pre-prepared lawn and prayed. Each of them wished others delicious. In noon, the blue sky seems endless, giving a sense of boundless space. The meadows sway under the gentle breath of the wind, and a soap cow was grazed near the boys, which from time to time mourned. The boys were among this beauty, and enjoyed the dishes that they cooked themselves. One of them noted that everything was just great. Sora tried the dish and expressed that the sweet and sour leaves, along with honey, create a true harmony of tastes. He was delighted with this combination. Rurka agreed with the boy, noting that she could not imagine that on a regular tourist hike, they would taste such high quality and amazing taste. The girls discussed the taste of the dish, and Rurika noted that honey oil also causes admiration. At this point, Sora noticed that Click appeared behind his back. The guy was surprised and thought it was the same animal. He carefully, so that the girls do not notice, took his hand behind his back and reached out to Klull. The beast without hesitation ate everything that the guy slipped to him. Sora looked at Seal and thought he was extremely sweet. Suddenly Chris noticed a guy and a strange creature next to him. Sora assured the girls that milk, cookies, and nut tea have a great taste, and they happily agreed with it. At that moment, Chris thought that she wanted to speak at it casually, as well as Sora and Rukrek. However, the girl covered a sense of shyness, although they were in one team. The river looked closely at Chris, and noticed a thoughtful expression on her face. The ruler immediately realized the essence of the problem and thought that she was just incredibly shy. Rurika confessed to Sori that she would like to have a magic bag that would keep these dishes warm. Sarai said in surprise that they still had such a thing. Rukrek remembered how she once saw how they sold such a thing. It was an extremely effective magic bag that could store food fresh and warm for a long time. However, whatever it is, the cost of this magical bag was too high for her. Rukre returned to Chris and said she heard about such spatial magic. She asked the girl about what was hiding inside this bag, Rukiria winking at Chris, hinting that it was her specialization. Chris began to be nervous and clumsily turned to Rururika. Chris tried to come together with thoughts, and suddenly she noted that it was not spatial witchcraft. Sora realized that Chris was just ashamed, but it would not hurt her to complete the plan. The priest began to stutter, and it became difficult for her to pronounce whole words. Sora and Rurika were focused on the girl, waiting for her answer. But Chris's face was sharply lit by a blush, and she lowered her gaze. Chris apologizes to the boys for failed to complete the plan. Sora decided to support the girl, assuring her that everything is fine. After all, mistakes occur in everyone. And Rurika was intended to encourage the girl and asked to try again. Chris lingered a little and explained to the boys that spatial witchcraft is the art of managing space. And here is another branch in front of you. It is a miracle of storage. Having said this word, the subject immediately finds out in your stock. The peculiarity of this magical storage is the ability to literally stop the time, so that the food remains fresh and always ready for consumption. Sora was thinking about it, and Rurika rejoiced in the girl and praised her. However, Chris continued, noting that spatial magic users were actually few, and heard that even without combat abilities, anyone who possesses this art necessarily receives an invitation to the elite detachment. Chris could not understand why she was so upset. However, during the pronunciation of the last words, the mood of the girl was extinguished, and a barely audible whisper broke out of her lips. Ruriko felt the joy for her and praised again. Sora smiled and noted Chris that it was a very convenient thing. He would also like to master such magic. Chris replied to the guy a good-natured smile. Sora thought about spatial magic, recalling that he had been checking his parameters for the last time. This skill was not on his list. The guy owned skills in various fields, from blocking access to information and night vision to cooking, parsing things into pieces, drawing, and even parallel thinking. Sora began to think that he may still have points of skills. However, he still could not understand where this skill was hiding. Sora turned to Chris and noted that when he learned of simple witchcraft, he was able to use it immediately. He was wondering if everyone had the same experience. Chris stopped, thinking about this question. Chris became awkward that, in general, one day he would have mastered this skill. Sora replied Chris that yes, everything is true. Even if he wants to use one or the other magic, it all comes down to luck. Chris agreed, noting that it really was. Chris said she heard of special rare skills that can be mastered by reading books. However, such books are written in unusual symbols, and if a person does not know them, then it will be almost impossible to gain these skills. Sora answered the girl that now he understood everything. He expressed his gratitude to Chris for sharing this information with him. Sora was satisfied, while Chris was full of tension and excitement. Sora began to sweat awkwardly, thinking about what else you could say to Chris. For him, this conversation was extremely inconvenient. The young man realized that he was tasked with changing the atmosphere in the team. Unexpectedly, Sora asked the girls how to stop mushroom reproduction. And immediately he answered that everything was reduced to a simple rule, not to argue with his mother. The girls, of course, did not expect to hear it from him. They looked at the guy, not knowing what to say. Their views were filled with embarrassment and non-understanding. Sora asked the girls if everything was clear to them. So far, the boys have been on the road for a long time. Of course, they took breaks while traveling, but thanks to their abilities, he did not feel tired at all. The man wondered what distance they had already overcome. Suddenly, there was a dark figure behind Sora, forcing the boy to fall. Sora felt it and turned sharply, wanting to understand what it was. However, there was nothing behind the boy's back, and he just stared at the distance. The young man was straining immediately, feeling someone looking at him. Rurika noticed the boy's anxiety and asked what was the matter and where he was looking so closely. Sora immediately smiled nervously and answered the girl that everything was fine, and it's just nonsense. However, Sora felt that from the moment he had acquired the skill of detection, something began to be worried. In the capital of the kingdom, as well as during a campaign, he clearly felt someone's vigilant look. It did not give the rest of Sora, and he could not understand who he could need. Sora was suggested that these could be those people from the castle, but he could not understand why they were chased after they kicked it. Before Sora, a window appeared in which he was asked if he wanted to spend points to gain a new skill. Blocking estimate, Sora thought. He decided that the right moment had come for this step. Sora replied that he wanted to spend his points. Suddenly, a window appeared in front of him, which testified to the acquisition of a new skill capable of blocking the assessment at the first level. The day gradually stepped until the evening, and the boys continued their unforgettable journey. Barika told the boys that the sun was about to hide for the horizon. She suggested that they staged a camp near the tree she pointed. Sora gladly supported Rureorak, anticipating his first camp in life. It really seized him. Rurika suggested that the boys cook dinner first. However, the thought of the girls suddenly changed, and she changed her mind. First, the girl decided to share with other information about her abilities. Rurika suggested that in the event of an emergency, they will be able to act more efficiently. Rukrera suggested that the boys would initially tell them about their skills. Its specialization is to strengthen the body and find objects. So, I decided to tell Chris. She confessed with some surprise that she has the magic of fire and wind. The girl also remembered that another her skill is simple magic. The ruler returned to Sora and asked what skills he had. She noted that he may not mention those who would prefer to keep mystery. After all, neither he nor Chris reveal all his secrets. Sora thought that she expressed it. She did not expect him to be an omniscience about them. However, it was a little strange for the guy. Sora believed that he had mastered several skills, but they remained low. Because of this, he was not sure whether he would be able to use them in a real battle. Sometimes Sora hesitated what to tell the girls. Sora told the girls that his abilities were limited to simple magic and the ability to carry things. In response, Rurek noted that that's what she imagined. According to her, these are great skills. Subsequently, the guy began to cook dinner. Rukrera cut food and announced the boys that they would be modest bread and soup while traveling, and dried meat would also be consumed. Sora asked in the Rooks that she means when she says they eat something that does not deteriorate and weighs very little. Rukrek replied that yes, this is true. But their noon snack was an exception. A little time sailed and the boys were ready for the meal. They sincerely prayed again, expressing gratitude for the gifted food. Rukarik noted that this dish has no variety of tastes. Sora agreed with her. The young man reflected, which is why magicians of space are so valuable. Meanwhile, the night has fallen, and our hero is ready to act again, so as not to afford to solidify in inactivity. Brukrek declared the boys that the sun had already gone over the horizon. She emphasized that it was time to go to bed. Someone should always be guarded at night. Rarek wondered in Asura if he believed that she would handle this task. Still, it was his first time, so they can stay together. Sora with confidence stated that he may well cope on his own. He was convinced that thanks to his skills in walking, he did not feel fatigue at all, and his ability to detect would surely be useful at night. Sora told the girls that he would be the first to keep a fire and sit. Still, he will not fall asleep because of passionate excitement. The girls thanked the boy, and Rurika noted that now they leave everything in his hands. Chris apologized to the boy and added that they probably had better to go. The girls waved the boy for goodbye, wishing him a good night. In response, Sora gave them a sign with his hand. The girls bypassed trees and comforted one of them. And here Chris had already fallen under the soft crack of the fire, and the Sora stayed near the flame. Suddenly the guy came to the voice of Rurika. He looked at her in surprise, because she was still not sleeping. Rudika was looking forward to the guy if he had a moment. Sora realized that it was a night secret, and from that it was a strange premonition. So I replied that yes, of course, they could talk. Rurika sat with a guy by the campfire and noted that he was doing well today, especially given that it was his first day. Sora decided to support the Rurik, and the guy noted that she did a great manner. Rurikly winked the boy and confessed that she was a little worried about him and everything. However, she now believes that these excitements were in vain. Rukuria noted that this guy always dreamed of traveling the whole world. Having become discouraged, Sora thanked the girl for her support. Sora confessed to Ruriko that only because of their help he succeeded, because they have much more experience. Ruriko laughed at the boy and expressed gratitude to Sori. Sora said the girl that they have been traveling for several years, if he was not mistaken. The guy asked Rurik if she had any interesting stories. The girl was thinking about being interested in Sora. The girl replied that she could tell them about the Imperial Arena. So we are ready for the fact that he would definitely want to know more about her. Roshia told that she was somehow invited there, but she didn't like it. In her opinion, everything looked like a theatrical action. Sora assured the girl who fully understands her. He was convinced that it was not the most pleasant experiences for anyone. Rurika sighed with a smile, telling Sori that there were many wonderful moments in her story. The girl remembered the smiles of her clients from different parts of the world as an example. Rurika shared with the guy the thoughts that overwhelmed her at the time. How much she rejoices, what became the traveler. Sora was quite surprised by the girl's words. And he replied again, Rurika, which is good, even in this dimension, understands her. The guy remembered the happy faces of his customers when he was doing delivery. Sora added that one day he would be a traveler. Sora and Rurika laughed at this. The guy sat silently by the campfire for a while, and Rurika turned to him again. The girl noted that she was pleased when Sora spoke with Chris. Rukrek confessed that it was the first time she saw Chris who was talking to someone but her. Rukuria rejoiced so sincerely that she even noted how much she was happy for Chris. She was even more grateful for the fact that Sora now became her girlfriend. She thanked the guy especially for that. But Sora answered the girl that no, he had to thank him. After all, he is the only one who really gets pleasure in this camping. Destruck acknowledged that the Sora was in fact an unsurpassed guy. But suddenly the expression of her face changed, and she turned to the boy, stating that if he was harming Chris, she would kill him. The girl asked ominously if he understood it. Sora tightened and looked at the girl with an expression of fear in her eyes. Sora assured the Rurik that he would in no way harm her. Rurika rose from the ground, noting that it was good. This is what she wanted to talk to him. Rukuria went to the resting place and wished Sori good night. Sora agreed, and in response wished the girl pleasant dreams. Meanwhile, silence prevailed on the street, and only a barely audible cracking of the campfire was in the outskirts. Sora sat quietly by the fire, looking thoughtfully, his burning shimmer. He remembered the words of Rurik. If he in any way causes damage, she will certainly kill him. He was nervously protected. Sora felt that he was his first friends in this world, so he sought to protect them and not create problems. Sora thought that in Japan, he did not have a relationship with girls, because he, in general, was a little afraid of them. The guy could not understand how to act in such a situation. Suddenly, Kel occurred right in front of Sora. He jumped so suddenly that the guy shouted at fright. The head seal rolled on the ground, heading straight to the fire. When the seal rolled to the campfire, he looked carefully at him, and then seemed frightened. The seal immediately wandered from the flame. It was very scared of Sora, and everyone tried to find out if everything was fine with him. CL started jumping, expressing his rage on that guy. Sora barely kept a smile, and assured Kel that I am glad to see him unharmed. Suddenly Kel jumped again, with unspeakable joy, plunging into heaven. Sora began to chase the animal, asking CL where he flew from him again. CL pointed to the boy on a fascinating picture of heaven over their heads. The night sky was littered with numerous stars, which created incredible beauty. Sora with enthusiasm noted that it resembles a fairy tale. He has never seen anything like this in his life before. However, suddenly the thoughts were captured by Sora. The guy wondered, because indeed, this is his first experience of working with someone. However, even if he does not know how to proceed, but then he suddenly cut off the flow of his thoughts and said, "Stop." Sora asked if it was his first time. The young man remembered that he had repeatedly encountered trials, difficulties, and joys in this world. Sora decided that he should definitely get to know them, but in his own way. He sought to do it sincerely. Sora came to the conclusion that he should better know his new friends. And finally a new day has come, and the sun came down in another world. Sora fell asleep with a deep dream at dawn, and no bright sunlight could wake him up. Suddenly shadows began to show up on the boy's face. The guy felt that someone had enclosed the sun, standing above him. It made him open his eyes to understand who was in front of him. Sora saw that they were Rukrek and Chris. The girls greeted a good morning young man and gave him charming smiles. Sora thought it was his first awakening with greetings in this world. As soon as the carcass noticed that Sora woke up, she retreated from him. The girl stated that it was time for them to bake bread. Chris sits next to Sora, noticeably nervous, trying to tell him something. The girl is to be filled, but in the end, he asks the boy if he would like her to help him with washing. Sora thought that he would not really interfere with refreshment, and decided that it was worth doing. Unexpectedly, for no reason, Chris directed her rod directly into the young man's face and gave him a stream of water. She loudly announced that it was her ability to clean. Sora smiled, surprised, but at the same time feeling a pleasant novelty. After such surprise, he awakened instantly. The guy sincerely thanked Chris for her support. Chris's face was filled with a blush, so she immediately rushed to the help of Rurika in bread. This is how their fun morning began with real friends. Sora made gratitude to the girls for a delicious breakfast. In the meantime, the boys not only ate, but also gathered all their things. And here they went on the road again. The boys were full of joy about this. Sora recalled that he was constantly in motion, which means that his indicators should increase. The guy said the team to open the status, and before it immediately appeared the status bar. Sora was certain that he reached a new level, but with each passing time he felt more and more difficult to increase it. Despite this, the joy was overwhelmed. Meanwhile, Sora has mastered new skills that can be learned: onions, night vision, painting, cooking, spatial magic, analysis of details, and parallel thinking. Sora reported that he now has spatial magic. The guy realized that he was the same one that Chris once told them. This guy believed that it was a magic that could store food that was already on the verge of spoilage. Sora was absolutely sure that she certainly needed such a skill. Sora looked at his status again and wondered. The development of his skills of blocking ranks is very difficult in the usual way. Therefore, he decided to spend 2 points of skills to raise this skill to a second level. Sora immediately decided to experience a new skill. For example, he focused on his backpack. The guy thought about spatial magic to apply it. Suddenly a window appeared in front of him. Sora looked at him with a question in his eyes. The window itself indicated that the level of spatial magic capacity is insufficient to preserve the subject of such sizes. Sora advised to increase their level and try again. Sora wondered if his object is too large, which means that the first step he needs to increase the level of spatial magic. Sora decided to keep his stocks, hoping that he would be able to increase her level. Sora decided to try to use spatial magic again, and suddenly the food disappeared from his hands. It instantly moved to the repository. Sora wondered that he should also focus on the development of parallel thinking and improving recovery. Suddenly, Rurika noticed that the guy was clearly confused. She returned to Sora to ask if he was fine, and whether he was behind them. Sora quickly looked away from the statistics and apologized to the girls. Now this guy has acquired new skills: spatial magic, the ability to think, and improved recovery. Despite the fact that the boy's skills were not growing by day, but by hours, Sora decided not to tell the girls yet. He intended to leave it secret until the right moment was released. so his path lasted, and he remained quite calm. From time to time, Sora and girls made stops to reinforce and restore strength. So they passed 2 days on the road. At some point, the boys went to the forest, but the ruler carefully adhered to the map. Sora was quite surprised that the village was hiding in the thicket of the forest. Rushika shared with the boys the information that before their journey, she learned about the area of their camp. It turned out that locals are real forestry professionals. Judging by the map, their meeting with this unique place will happen very soon. Meanwhile, the boys came to a broken fence, and everyone felt a slight tension. Finally, there were several small houses, several animals, a fence, and a plate that it is a rhino village. Sora tensely asked Rurika and Chris whether everything should be. Rurik replied that, in her opinion, it is a matter of goblins that attacked the village. Unexpectedly, a little boy looked from behind the bushes in front of the boys. From the expression on the boy's face, it was clear that he was bothered by something. He asked if they were really the same travelers. In response, the boys nodded. Then the guy quickly invited them to enter the house. While running, the guy shouted to the elder, reporting him about the appearance of travelers in their village. Sora, Rukrik, and Chris were spacked with fearful views. Despite their concern, they still followed the guy to a small hut. When the boys came inside, the door of the house remained closed, but people had the opportunity to watch their conversation with the elder through the windows. And of course, they could not miss the chance to take this opportunity. Sora, along with the girls, entered the house and settled on a small rug in the middle of the room. Their faces expressed tension and excitement. Suddenly, the elder turned to the boys and asked them for forgiveness. It was clear that the man was quite worried about their difficult situation. Sora and her girlfriends were ready to listen to a man, ready to help him in all possible ways. The gray-haired elder expressed his sincere gratitude to travelers for his help. He said that their village was suffering from the invasion of horrible goblins. Under the power of fear, people were on the verge of despair and did not know how to be further. Rurak again addressed the man with a question, which testifies to the approach to the crisis. The girl noted that the order concerned only 5 pathetic goblins. The man confirmed that yes, at first it was when the order was sent to the guild. The man said that at first there were only 3 of them, but every day they became more and more. Rudrak replied to her husband that she was really aware of what horrible situation their village got into. However, the girl decided to find out why. Knowing that the number of goblins was growing daily, he did not change the order in the guild throughout the month. The boys realized that it was for this reason that the reward for this order was increased. The man addressed the girl with the question of how many times he would have to apologize to them. He felt a deep shame. The young Rukarek asked the elder how many goblins remained in the end, because they did not allow them to live quietly. The man tilted his head and said with sadness that there were 10. Rukrek exclaimed with horror and asked, "There were really 10? Unexpectedly, the man changed his answer, stating that in fact the goblins were not 10, but 20. Again, Rukrek turned to the elder, wondering how many monsters actually. She just couldn't understand the number. After that, the man changed his answer again and apologized to the boys. He confessed that he was a liar, and finally said that goblin was only 30. The boys stood on the edge of hysterics, not realizing that it may have only been a joke. There were so many goblins in their village that they were not sure if it would end smoothly. At that time, the knight visited the village again. The girls meanwhile rested and gained strength. Sora woke up again and watched closely at what was happening in the village. At night, he thought about how their fights with goblins in the village would unfold. Throughout the night, thoughts were constantly buzzing in the head of Sora. During yesterday's conversation, the destruction was asked at the elder. At what frequency of goblins attack their settlement? The man replied that this usually happens about once every few days. The elder also reported that they were here last night, so he suggests that goblin would be able to return in 3 to 4 days. Russia replied to the man that now everything has become clear. So today they decided to rest, and tomorrow to go into their den. Sora was concerned that he really had to deprive a living creature, and not by chance, but purposefully, even if it is for the sake of rescue of the villagers. Sora began to tremble, thinking whether he could eventually cope with this task, because it was really significant. Suddenly, Sora noticed that someone was approaching their home. The man turned and saw the boy they met as soon as they approached the village. The boy turned to Mr. Aventurist. He expressed his gratitude to Sora for having come to their rescue and did not leave in a difficult moment. Sora understood his experiences and the difficulties that struck on them. Sora, starting to look around, noticed that the guy's pants were torn and it probably happened after one of the attacks. In addition, Fragments of the fence are scattered on the site, or rather, what is left behind. Around the village, various objects, including flowers and garden tools. Sora did not answer the boy, just looked at him silently. Her gaze met tears in his eyes. The guy reported sorry that these goblins abducted all the chickens from their village, even his favorite, which was called the Lucky Man. Sora mentioned that the book was written how goblins enjoy others' suffering. It was extremely awful for him. Unexpectedly, Sora began to consider the boy's body more closely and found something interesting. Sora stood rapidly from his chair and told the boy that there was a wound on his hand. Sora grabbed the guy by the hand to look better and noticed huge, deep wounds from his claws. However, the guy replied that there were many people with more serious injuries than just scratches. Therefore, he is exactly okay, and his wounds do not bother him at all. Despite this, Sora felt a deep sympathy for the guy. In an effort to help, he pulled a bottle of potion out of his pocket. The Sora, without hesitation, poured a little of this potion directly on the wound of the guy, and he was surprised to watch the result. Just in the eyes of the boy, the wounds began to disappear, and his hand became smooth and clean. The boy was genuinely surprised by the magic he applied to him. Sora decided to pass the boy with an elixir. She asked him to go immediately and share this potion with other villagers. The guy was a little ashamed and answered sorry that these potions were too expensive. Their pocket would not withstand it. However, Sora quietly asked the boy to just take a bottle and help the rest of the peasants. The only thing he pleaded was not to tell the girls about their secret, because it could be angry. The guy listened carefully to the man and expressed his sincere gratitude for his help. The guy again turned to Mr. Adventures and confessed that he could not fight, but would surely pray for their victory. Sora was still trembling, but in order not to cause anxiety, she clenched her hand into his fist. So she answered the boy with consent, allowing him to do as he conceived. Meanwhile, the first rays of the morning enveloped the village, and it began to come to life. The villagers decided to accompany Sora and girls on a campaign to Goblin. The elder assured the boys that the whole village would pray for their safety in the battle. The boys were seriously set, because their morale was exalted. The difficult battle was waiting ahead. Sora and the girls went on a trip. Rukurek told the boys that many goblins were found in the southwest, so you need to move in that direction. However, they were almost in place. Rukrera turned to Sora and expressed his apologies to him for the fact that his first hunt was so unpleasant. However, he reassured her, assuring that everything was fine. Sora told the girls that the inhabitants of this village were suffering, so they would have to make every effort to free the village from these goblins. Suddenly, Chris returned to Sora and assured him that she would provide all possible help. Ririka showed solidarity with her friend and nodded. However, Sora was tense and restlessly swallowed. The guy believed that it was a wonderful idea, and they would certainly bring it to life. The boys decided to carefully review the plan they prepared before the battle. The boys decided that from the very beginning, Chris would apply his magic to strike the goblins and confuse them. The girl's magic will be so powerful that the monsters will not be able to recover immediately after its action. The boys predicted that the goblins would span and run away from their cave. They will fussy in different directions, like blind kittens. And it was at this moment that the turn of Rurika, which brownly rushed into the battle and began to exterminate these monsters. This girl has a significant advantage of 2 skilled sabers and extensive experience. Thanks to these skills, it is capable of destroying a large number of goblins. Further, Sora and Chris will focus on a large part of the goblins. In turn, Sora will focus on those several goblins who will be able to evade guys. Some monsters will undoubtedly start panic, get lost, and do not know what to do and where to run. This will certainly turn to our boys, and so the look of Sora stopped at one of the goblins, which should be destroyed. The young man looked at one of the goblins and remembered that in the numerous books he had once studied, these creatures are described as a fierce monster that destroy everything around. But when the guy looks at them personally, a completely different feeling wakes up in his soul. In the eyes of Sora, panic was frozen because he was afraid to harm them. Sora could not realize that it was at this moment that he would have to pick up the life of a smart creature. He intended to just kill him. It was unacceptable for a man. At this point, the Karka turned her gaze to Sora and said she knew what he was thinking about. However, the girl decided to ask the guy what was waiting for the village and his inhabitants, if left alive now. In the end, goblins will destroy everything in their path: food, work, places for life. As a result, people will find themselves without anything. Rurika, during the destruction of Goblin, noted the boy that perhaps in this situation they did not have to make a judgment about what actions are fair and which. At least Rurika did not sincerely want the rest of the people to suffer again. They, for their part, did not extend their help. His eyes expanded with surprise, and the flow of thoughts is no longer stopped. Sora recalled the boy with whom he met in the village. Horror was red in his eyes, and tears were passionate about help for his native land. Suddenly, it was at this moment that a sinister peak of evil goblin appeared before Sora, who rushed to the boy. Sora was gradually realizing that he simply had no alternative, and he must do so. Sora clenched his teeth, tightened, and prepared to meet the blow. When Goblin almost came close, Sora was lightning with his sword and struck a direct blow to the enemy's stomach. It was a decisive action that dispelled his doubts. Sora got tasted before, and this gave him the opportunity to fight the goblins without hesitation. And soon, his first battle with them was left behind. The earth was strewn with the bodies of monsters, which wore merciless traces of the strokes of the swords of that boy. Rukrera, turning to Sora, reported that it was the last goblin, so now they destroyed them all. The girl praised the young man, noting that he had perfectly coped with this task. Suddenly, the girl's face has been striking. There was fear in her eyes. Rurika noticed the boy that there was blood on his head. He is probably wounded. Sora was nurtured and asked with anxiety if she was telling the truth. However, the guy assured that he was all right and he feels good, just a slight scratch. Raising his head, Sora saw a Chris that held a bottle of potion in her hands. The young man immediately reported that it was a very valuable potion. He assured her that he did not need it, because the wound would soon heal by itself. Despite all this, Chris shook his hand to the boy. This act surprised Sora, but he did not deny. The young man dropped on his knees, allowing Chris to make more convenient to treat the Sora wound. Chris put a small napkin to his forehead and gently tied it with a ribbon. During this, she never denied the girl and did not tell her a word. Only when Chris finished cultivating the guy's wound did Sora turn to thank the girl. Chris remained tense and did not answer. Rukare was pleased that Chris had taken the initiative and came to the aid of Sori. After the boys have completed their work, they gathered all the goblin bodies and burned them on a large fire. They did this to prevent the conversion of goblins into a runny nose, and that the smell of blood does not attract the attention of even more dangerous animals. Sora, Rorika, and Chris stood at the fire with his eyes closed, as it was a ritual of honoring the memory of the dead. Subsequently, the boys returned to the village safely and immediately went to the elder's house. Rurika handed over to her bag a bag, assuring that all 34 goblins were successfully destroyed. The man trembled from impotence, but immediately it was clear that he had relieved. The elder expressed their deepest gratitude to the children. After all, thanks to their decisive fight against goblins, it was possible to protect the village from numerous troubles. Rukareya reassured her husband, saying that they were lucky this time because their opponents were only goblin. However, the girl asked him not to replace the truth about the orders he sent to the guild. The elder replied that it would now be more careful in such cases. A smile appeared on the man's face, and he told the boys that he had arranged a real feast for them in honor of their arrival. He invited them to stay and enjoy hospitality. When the night came, the boys gathered for a feast, arranged in honor of their victory over the goblins. Children on their heads were dressed in flowers, and when they saw the festive table, their eyes expanded with surprise. In the very center of the village, the giant table was covered with a lot of dishes. All residents were glad that the monsters would no longer endure, and staged a real holiday on this occasion. The boys were approached by a girl with a baby on his back, and a man, bowing to them as a sign of gratitude. The girl explained that these goblins almost took away their boy. The man sincerely thanked for his help from the heart. 2 girls approached them and reported that Goblin had stolen half of their pigs, but now all right. The girls sincerely thanked the boys for their help. They were approached by 3 more who expressed their gratitude to travelers for saving them. Subsequently, all the villagers gathered around the boys, expressing their deep gratitude for their feat. The peasants raised the glasses, praising their courage, and filled the atmosphere with a joyful celebration. However, Sora, Rukrek, and Chris only stopped and froze in an unspeakable surprise, looking at the locals. At that moment they lacked words to react somehow. Unexpectedly, someone pulled Sora by his hand, attracting his attention. It was the same guy who called that man Mr. Adventure. A joyful smile shone on his face, and he heartily thanked Sori for salvation. The boy expressed his gratitude for the destruction of goblins, so they can play safely again. The guy looked at the face of the Sora and noticed under the wreath of flowers a gauze bandage. He immediately asked him if he had suffered some injury. Sora replied that no, nothing wrong with him. His friends have already taken care of the wound and tied it. The guy exhausted and calmed down, saying that everything was fine and there was no reason to worry. However, the guy's facial expression has changed to a confident, and he told Sori that when he grows up and become an adult, He also dreamed of becoming an adventurer like them. The guy assured Sora that he would become extremely powerful and be able to protect the village from attacks of various monsters. It moved south. The young man sat carefully next to the boy and gently ran his head on his head, showing support. Sora cheered the boy, assuring him that he was completely convinced of his success. He believes that everything will be in the future, and he has set himself the goal of becoming even stronger than it is to stay with this guy. The boy was extremely grateful when he heard it from the traveler and sincerely thanked Sora. Suddenly, the guy called his friends, who gathered in a small team. They were interested in asking him that he had brought him here. The boys called him to join their adventure. He immediately replied that he would be with them. The boy bowed his head in front of the stretcher, showing gratitude and respect, and then immediately rushed to friends to play together. Sora waved his boy with his hand, thinking that today he deliberately killed the creature with his own hands. He was still overwhelmed by the worries about it. Although Sora was well aware of how many evil had been caused by goblins to the villagers, he could not decide to destroy the first of them for a long time. However, it is because he and the girls gathered with thoughts and immediately tuned to the right order, they managed to keep the smiles of happy children and their parents. And so I realized that this day is forever etched in his memory, and he would retain his memories of him for many years. Sora and the girl sat down at the table, and suddenly Ruraka exclaimed, "What is it?" The girl tasted the dish and stated that she was incredibly delicious. Ruraka confessed that she had never tried anything like that. Ruraka turned to Sora and persistently suggested that he immediately taste the dish. The girl stretched the boy with a plate on which she carefully placed a refined dish. Sora took it and first thought it was bacon. After trying the dish, the guy immediately confessed that she was incredibly delicious. Sora felt as if the taste had moved it back into the past. The guy could not even imagine that he could feel the taste of his home here in this unfamiliar place. Rurika laughed, seeing his surprise, and jokingly asked what was a reaction. The girl turned and noticed that the boys were going to the older man. There was a plate of meat in his hands. The man explained to the guys that he was one of the local dishes that their village is famous for. It spoils much faster than dried meat, so it is rarely sold for exchange. Rukrera answered the stranger that she was clear, but Sora became interested in whether bacon was really such a rarity. The elder of the village and girls spoke with each other, but suddenly their conversation interrupted the warning sign, the clim of clicks. The young man looked at him carefully and realized that he was again nearby. The elder laughed slightly and told the boys that I was glad because they liked everything. The man lifted a plate with bacon and reported that he had a lot of this taste, so they can eat how much the soul desires. Suddenly, Kel flew to the plate rapidly, eagerly estimating its contents. Without a moment, he swallowed all the bacon at a time. As soon as everyone noticed that bacon was mysteriously disappeared from the plate, they got away from surprise. The boys spread their mouths with surprise and began to question everyone around. Or no one saw the food just took and disappeared on its own. At that moment, Sora was all wet with sweat and thought that only he was able to see the seal. He had to somehow explain to those who had just happened. The young man began to stutter and tried to tell something to surprise people. None of the residents believed in their eyes. One of the men asked not to tell him that it was a real spirit. Meanwhile, Kel was destroying the last crumbs from the elder plate. Everyone was on the edge of the limit of excitement, and some even took a breath from the tension. During the festive feast, the Klimj made a stir. One of the inhabitants suddenly exclaimed that it was a true ghost. Some of the inhabitants began to feel indignant because of an invisible and mysterious creature who was shamelessly eating their reserves. However, Sel was aware that everyone around was angry with him. This has caused great concern and excitement. The boys approached the elder, waving their hands above the plate in trying to feel at least some material trail. But they exclaimed that there was no one at all. At that moment, the boys, without any obstacles, pierced the body of a disappointed Klal. He felt humiliated and embarrassed. Sora noticed how Kel was flying from him to heaven. But for some reason, everyone around began to shout and crazy with happiness. Rurka, full of anxiety, turned to the elder and, looking in his eyes, asked what was happening around. What do all these people discuss? The elder said that the phenomenon, when food disappears unexpectedly, is known among people as a fairy tale. Sometimes it is called the sacrifice for the spirit. The man also told that he became aware that in that year when it happens, the forests blossom lavishly, and cattle grows healthy and strong. Rurika realized that it was a good sign for this place, and it pleased it. The man calmly turned to the boys, noting that today is the day of true joy. It is full of best news and events. This should be noted. Only empty plates remained on the table, and almost all the food disappeared. And that means that the time of entertainment has begun. All the people in the village have fun in the dance, rejoicing in such a wonderful day. In the heart of the circle, Rukrek circled with a passion with the elder. Sora and Chris were staying at the table without joining the dance. Laughing, Sora noticed Chris that he was well saturated. However, the question from Klel continued to give the boy rest. He could not understand what it was, a white and fluffy creature. Sora wondered if it was really like a fairy or spirit. Sora returned to Chris, who asked if the girl had knowledge of fairies and spirits. He asked her to share any information, if any. Thinking, Chris replied that there were fairies and spirits in this world. The girl said that the fairies are reminiscent of young people, but they are characterized by the fact that their backs grow wings. Of course, they are well known in their own and can speak their native language freely. As the head of the village told, everyone here recognizes they like to play people. But for example, they can eat someone's dish directly in the eyes of the owner. The girl noted that in terms of different legends, the spirits are somewhat reminiscent of fairies. However, they do not have a specific shape or appearance. They are able to understand human language, although only a few of them can be said so that it is clear. Magicians of the spirit can communicate with them with the help of thoughts. But this is just what she heard. Sora was quite impressed with the story of Chris. The young man replied that she was not only well aware of magic, but can also tell a lot of interesting things about such things. Sora called it simply incredible. However, Chris was so embarrassed that it almost brought her to rabies. The girl turned away from Sora and began to stumble. She could not answer him anything. At that moment, Sora thought about what it could mean. It was likely that he was really a real spirit, but it could also be something else that he could understand. Suddenly, Rurik, who was constantly in the Society of Elders, turned to Sora and Chris. The girl told the boys that the head of the village told her that they would share the meat with them. In response, the older just laughed. Chris and Sora felt a great pleasure in this news, and Sora was especially delighted with bacon. While others continued to comfort themselves with dances and drinks, celebrating a happy day, the village of the village quietly led the children to a small house. The man handed them a few meat of meat and bowed again. The boys were genuinely surprised, so Sora asked why they were given so much. But can they really accept such volume? The village replied that they became real rescuers, and if they need something else, they can safely turn to this person. Sora asked the village's head if he could tell them how this meat was being prepared. The man explained that after processing, the product is dried and smoked on firewood. The head of the village asked the guys if they wanted to know more about the process, and here the village headman gave the boys a whole lecture on meat. The boys immediately had many questions. Chris wondered in the man whether the taste would remain unchanged if you use wood from outside the village. Rurita noted that it took a lot of effort. However, it is quite clear, because the meat is surprisingly delicious. Sora appealed to the village's elder to sell him part of this tree. Rurika was very surprised and wondered what he wanted to make it alone. This is extremely difficult. Sora answered the girl that this meat is so delicious that he wanted to try to cook it on its own. The peasants replied that this tree grows around their village and is not so valuable that it is money. The man pointed to the corner, noting that they had a lot of firewood, so they are allowed to take as many firewood as they want. It surprised the boys. Sora expressed her gratitude to the head of the village, and the man left the house. Sora sat down, pretending to be needed by firewood, and decided to take so much with him. But she was extremely outraged by the boys' act and assured that they would not be able to pull it with them. After all, they have only 3 days to return. The girl asked for Sora if he understood the situation. Sora laughed and hesitated a little. So, Sora decided to take advantage of his skills of magical storage. And immediately the firewood consisted of 53 logs disappeared without a trace. The girls could not believe their eyes when the fuel in their eyes disappeared. It surprised them. Rukek immediately asked the guy if he had used spatial magic. Sora clumsily replied that yes, it was really true. The girls immediately rushed to the boy, and Rurik shared with Sora an important secret. The girl noted that even elite detachments seek to see such a boy in their benches. She confessed that she was envied by Sori. The guy nodded with consent, and added that he would prefer to remain a secret for only 2 of them. However, Rukarek asked Sora why he made such a decision. After all, he can join a strong team and even receive fees for it. Sora replied to the girl that although he had spatial magic, he was still not strong enough to join such teams. Sora noted that if he joined the powerful team, he would only be burdened with his presence. So, at the moment, he decided to gain more experience to become even more powerful. And, undoubtedly, he was fully staged by this determination. Ridrika replied that if he has a desire, he can leave it at this time. Chris also nodded as a sign of consent. Sora answered the girls that it would be a great joy for him. The guy sincerely thanked Rukek and Chris. Rukek asked the guy again if he really wants it to remain a secret from everyone. Sora replied that in the event of joining another team, they would have to divorce. The guy confessed that he's still seeking to stay in the team with them. Chris and Rukek froze, looking at the guy with his mouth open. Unexpectedly, Rurika shouted loudly on his back, forcing him to even shout. The girl came to the door and reported Sori that he undoubtedly seeks it. They also want to join the team. The Karka carefully struck the tent and slowly moved to the exit from the house. Chris was delayed for a short time. She came to Sora and gently took his hand. The girl closed her eyes and nodded to the boy, expressing consent and gratitude. Sora did not hide astonishment, looking at her. Rurika still felt tension and asked in Sora whether he managed to get a meat recipe from the old age. The girl questioned the question if the guy was able to cook at all. Sora replied that from time to time the mother helps in the kitchen. However, he does not know how to cook complex dishes. Rurika noted that she hopes that a wonderful derivative kitchen would be waiting for them on the way back. She asked Chris if she agreed with her. Meanwhile, the morning came the next day. After a joyful rural celebration, the boys went on the road to the royal capital. The new moon said goodbye to all the inhabitants of the village, left its borders, and went back. When the boys were walking, Sora thought that they gathered the supplies for them on the way back. He realized that their efforts were really appreciated. The boys moved the same way as they went to the village. This gave them some freedom of action and the opportunity to start playing with foods on food. Chris and Rurika were asked for Sora what chocolate is. Instead, the guy wondered in them what a row. Subsequently, it began to evening, and the guy stopped. Rurika suggested Sori and Chris to arrange the camp in this place. Rurika, with a friendly smile, asked the boy to treat them today with a delicious dinner. Sora assured the girl that would make every effort. Chris noted that in case the Sora spoils the lunch, she would prepare a spare option. Sora immediately tensed and asked Chris from which time she became so talking. Rurika laughed, looking at the guys. Chris was upset because of this, and the girl felt that she needed to try to say that word. She was also striving to cook something delicious to please Sora. The river began to shake the boy, saying that she puts great hopes for Sora, but he only asked her not to lift the bar of responsibility even higher. Sora laid all the food supplies around him, thinking what to cook from these simple foods. Sora considered this product, picking up different combinations for it, and so, by surprise, it was set up a new idea. Sora carefully took one fruit and began to peel it. Sora recalled how at the time in the village they tasted potatoes that resembled potatoes. The difference was only that on the surface of this tuber were funny patterns, but inside it was a real potato. Sora decided to cut everything into pieces, but they should then be put in the microwave, which they have unfortunately do not. So, he put pieces in a frying pan, added water and salt, and then fried it all. The young man decided to check his hand, but the pieces were unbearably hot. Sora believed that they were a little sweeter than regular potatoes, but still incredibly tasty. Sora decided to put them off for later. After that, he took the main character today, bacon. Sora decided to fry the bacon until a barely crispy crust. The guy would also like to add delicate bulbs to the dish, but they were not available. At the same moment, Chris and Rukurek began to approach the aroma of his food. Chris noted Sori that the aroma of the toasted bacon was just wonderful. Rurika added that the sound of hot oil is extremely melodic. She started flowing saliva. Sora smiled at the girls and said that almost ready. There were only a few moments. After that, the Sora decided to add potatoes to the bacon in the pan and season everything to taste. Then you need to fry everything. In a moment, the boy's dish was ready and he carried it to the girls. Sora thanked them for the patience and anticipation of his food. Sora gave them their culinary discovery: fried potatoes with a delicious bacon note. Chris and Rukurek looked enthusiastically at the plate. In addition, there was already a soup prepared on the table. They wished each other delicious. Rukrera tasted the dish, and turning to Sora, confessed that she was incredibly tender and delicious. Chris picked up the girl, adding that she had never tried anything like this before. They looked relaxed and asked the girls whether they told the truth, and this was quite comforted. Sora also tasted and noted that they taste sweeter than regular potatoes. In addition, they go well with salty bacon. Rukrera praised Sora, noting that he had done perfectly and cooks just wonderful. In addition, he demonstrated their culinary secrets. The girl wondered at the boy where he learned so virtuously cooking. Sora remembered how his mother explained that in their generation, young men should also be able to cook delicious dishes. He added that she even praised him for a self-cooked dish. so he sometimes started training in cooking. Chris smiled gently and noted that that boy had a wonderful mother. Sora praised Chris, noting that her soup is also delicious. These words forced the girl to blink from embarrassment, and she thanked the boy shyly. Chris thought that she put her whole soul in this dish. Chris told the guy that his food is still tasty than this girl's soup. Sora asked her, asking what she meant. After all, her soup is obviously better. The boys encountered a fierce dispute, trying to find out whose dish was the best, and the dispute lasted for a long time. Suddenly, Sora and Chris unexpectedly turned to the Rooks and asked whose dish seemed better. The girl feels extremely tense. However, she found a way out of the situation. Raising her hands up, announced that both were the winners. Chris and Sora were exchanged with ambiguous views. After that, they laughed well with everything that happened. Sora felt a little funny. Did he really sought to continue traveling with these girls? Sora turned to the girls and asked them if they, by chance, were not in the middle of their journey, right? He asked them how long they planned to stay in this country. Suddenly, the expressions on the faces of Chris and Rarika became sad, and they sniffed, lowering their eyes. Handuju replied that they would stay here until they gained the Marine rank. They now have a rank D, but when they move in ranks, they plan to move to another country. Sora answered the girls that now everything was clear. Rarika noted that, in view of this, they are still not strong enough, and should take many more tasks before they can rise in the rating. So they will have to stay here a little longer. Rukrera, looking at Chris, noted that they also spent a great time with Sora. These words were a little embarrassed by the guy. He did not expect to hear that. Rurika shared with Sora her desire. She wanted to offer him a little more to work together. Sora was extremely happy about this, and undoubtedly agreed with the girls, because he hoped that they would continue to work together. Sora looked to the sky, thinking about how quickly the moment of their separation approaches. He realized that he should increase his abilities and levels as soon as possible to become stronger. He had to do it to survive on his own, and to say goodbye to the girls with a smile on his face. The guy dreamed that the dawn in the clear sky gently illuminates the future road. Meanwhile, the task for Soros and girls has been successfully completed. The boys returned to the gilding of the adventures where Makaru was waiting for them. The girl glowed with joy from meeting them. Sora felt as if she had finally returned home when Makar met her with a cheerful greeting. The girl was surprisingly sweet, despite her boyfriend. Rudy could turn into the girl and hand her a bag. He could say that they had returned, and there are their magical stones here as a confirmation of the task. When Rukurek put a bag on the table, Makar was surprised by her size. She wondered the boys why they collected so many magic stones. Didn't there be just 5? Rutsik said that yes, but they would present the order on the execution of the order later. Makaru told the boys that in her opinion, this order was not easy for them. Looking at Sora, the girl noticed her head. She asked if he was injured. Sora assured that she has nothing to worry about. Everything was fine with him. Makaru sighed lightly and suggested that the boys could stick them a small patch if they wanted. Sora hesitated and looked at Chris, which looked extremely tense. The girl suddenly scattered and began to make sounds similar to the hissing of the kettle. So Sora was slightly inconveniently answered by Makaram that everything was fine with him. Rook realized what happens between Sora, Chris, and Giggle Dolly. Suddenly, she remembered the main news of the kingdom and asked Mikar how things were going with a wolf pack. Mikaru wondered the girl that she was referring to a flock of wolves that appeared near the capital. Wolves have already gained a lot of successful orders. Rurika sighed and expressed relief that everything was without serious difficulties. The girl wondered in Makaru, which means that they are not so strong. He replied to this. No, this is not true. As Mikaru noted, as a guilder predicted, the group was really a high-level monster. Usually such a structure is formed for a long time. However, in this situation, the adventurers of B and C ranks have already gathered, who decided to combine their efforts. The events developed quickly enough, but there was still a danger that such a monster was too close to their city. The role was on the verge of a nervous breakdown, so she turned to Makar again, asking if a high-level monster was really there. Makaru replied that it was. Never in the outskirts of the capital, nothing like this appeared. Recently they have difficulties. Sora supported Makar's opinion on this. Meanwhile, the guys immersed in different opinions left the guild. Ririka reported sorry that today and tomorrow they have a weekend. Sora replied that it was wonderful, and that they would meet in a guild then. The girls said goodbye to each other. Sora went unblood to his hotel, where he plunged into the world of soap operas. Suddenly near his face there emerged Ciel. Sora turned to a fluffy creature, which was finally next to him. Subsequently, Sora reappeared at the hotel. He instantly fell on the bed to move his spirit. However, these thoughts did not leave his mind. Sora was thinking that this was his first task for liquidation, and he still remembers how he dealt with that goblin. Sora carefully touched his wounds, and the memories flashed in Yago. The new moon realized that he would probably not have been able to survive if it was not for support from Kiss and Ruverka. Sora realized that although goblins alone are weak, their power is hidden in quantity. Therefore, he realized that he should definitely become stronger. The young man realized that he needed to train even more and improve his skills in his own sword. He also needs to constantly practice his skills to develop them. However, of paramount importance is that it must walk a lot to accumulate experience and skills. Suddenly, Sora rapidly jumped out of bed and said he spent a whole week in active walks. Therefore, he had a lot of experience. Sora immediately demanded that you open the status panel immediately. Soros found that he has already reached the 20th level, and also had 8 skills. Among all the highest level skills have reached Evaluation, Strengthening of the Body and Detection, they reached the 6th level. The experience meter showed that there were 70,000 points in his arsenal of 130,000. Sora also noted that the level of his skills increased, and for this he had just enough to travel on foot. Sora was extremely satisfied with his achievement. Sora reasoned that both new skills, namely parallel thinking and improved recovery that he gained during the task, were extremely useful. The young man realized that, using parallel thinking, he seems to share his consciousness between the 2 hemispheres of the brain. During the camping, Sora resorted to tricks. He slept using the left hemisphere of the brain, and having connected the right, used the skill of detection. Thus, Sora can at the same time rest and closely monitor the events that occur around it. However, despite all the aspirations, its level was still not high enough to use 2 skills at the same time. Subsequently, having spent all his JV, his abilities were automatically switched off, and the young man finally came to his senses. Frightened, he asked the girls where he was and why it is so dark. Sora felt a little fear, but thanks to the improved recovery skill, his SP stock was recovered fairly quickly. HP, SP, and MP are restored naturally over time, but their stocks disappear very quickly, which makes this skill extremely useful. When Sora got into this world, he had nothing. However, he now has skills and loyal comrades. This indicates that his new life is just wonderful. Suddenly, something attracted the guy's attention. Sora looked at the status panel and noticed that there is now much more experience to move to a new level. It seems that after the 20th level, the number of points required will increase by 20,000 for each subsequent level. Sora has come to the conclusion that every time raising the level will be more difficult, and therefore, gaining skills will take even more time. The young man had a great desire to change the newly acquired skills, but immediately shook his head and decided that let the glasses remain with him, just in case. Sora laughed slightly, realizing that there are many lessons in front of him. Sora involuntarily noted that he inadvertently touched the wound received in the battle. He mentally agreed with this action. He carefully removed the bandages and noted that due to his honed ability to recover quickly, the wound on his head was already healed. The guy confessed that he just loves his skills. At that moment, Sora recalled how Chris was tender and care for the wound guy, gently wrapping his head with a bandage. It was a little puzzled. He looked carefully at his bandage and thought. The guy decided that he may have tied his head again, although the wound had already healed. Sora tried to prevent Chris to excite, and now the boy materialized the CL and began to bite over him. When Sora noticed a fluffy creature, she was surprised. Seal suddenly began to form her heart with his ears. It was a great deal of Sora, and he began to demand the explanation loudly, accusing him of mocking him. CL only barely pulled his mouth with a smile, and then turned away from the guy. Sora immediately turned to Kel, persistently demanding that he looked into his eyes. He threatened the creature that if she does not do it immediately, he would start teasing her again. Sora wondered that his every day was full of fun, new and interesting events. And so, there is nothing planned for tomorrow. Perhaps this time he will take on the fulfillment of small orders. The guy's attention again attracted the CL, which circled around him. The guy noted that if you think, he still doesn't know who he really is. However, Sora suggested that he may be able to use his skills, because he has already reached a great level. Sora cast a careful view of Klull and used his ability to evaluate to get detailed information about him. But the guy suddenly appeared that the evaluation was disconnected. This was angered Sora, and he asked in what sense it was incapacitated. Meanwhile, several weeks since the ill-fated order of goblins in the village has run. Today, Sora meets with Ruverka and Chris to discuss a new order. Sora approached the seller who habitually called his uncle, and greeted him on a good morning. Sora asked him one of the barbecues. The seller also greeted the guy, and immediately handed Sora a barbecue on a skewer. In addition, the man added a little more juice. Sora thanked her husband, but a click of kebab immediately appeared on the horizon. However, the man did not even notice Kel and decided that he just forgot to add one piece to the skewers. The seller apologized to him, but Sora assured that he had just eaten him quickly, so the man did not even have time to notice it. Sora watched SL and he thought that he became surprisingly insatiable since the return from the village. The guy remembered how a hairy creature ate raguetos with bacon. Sora thought that Kel was the embodiment of voraciousness. The guy turned to Kiel and noted that he asked him not to steal food on people. Suddenly something struck Ciel, and he was covered by some fear. The villagers turned away from the boy and rushed to the opposite direction. Sora shouted to him, asking where he was going again. Recently, Sora has noticed that for some reason he was a little annoyed by the royal castle. And so I thought, can he feel some bad radiation that comes from this castle? Meanwhile, Sora has already had time to join the Adventurers Guild. There he was met by Siphon and Arco, and their joy from the meeting was obvious. Men exchanged greetings, happily hugging each other. Sora turned to the boys and asked why they were drinking it. Arco replied that just on vacation. The Siphon laughed at his words and noted that in fact it was just lazy to work. Siphon asked for Sora, whether the order came again. Sora, smiling, replied that she was waiting for Kiss and Ryujurek. Siphon noted that he understood everything. Siphon turned to the girl with a request to pour some drink for Sora. Responding, she assured that she was already going, but Sora stopped her, saying that she would only drink juice. And so the man sat down at the table. Arco turned to Sora with a tricky smile and asked how he was doing. Now he is in a detachment with two charming beauties, and Arco confessed that he would be envied a little. Sora explained to the boys that they only obey orders. As an example, they recently had to go hunting for crabs. They went hunting. However, it was a difficult task for Sora because of lack of experience, so its actions were slow. Meanwhile, he watched Chris, which was moving quickly, and considered himself a shame against this background. Sora also improved his career, and in the process he noticed that he was accustomed to a new environment and no longer needs an old card. Sora told the boys that they also fulfilled the gathering of herbs. Siphon, with a cunning expression, asked the guy who had their plans. Siphon said he had heard from people, as if they were considered very cool in this case. The man wondered in the Sora whether they managed to find a suitable place for this, or something like that. Sora remembered Chris's words that people who have an assessment skill are even more rare than those who are able to use spatial magic. It is a truly priceless ability. Sora took the juice lively, thinking about the unexpected steepness of his ability to evaluate. Although he does not want to attract extra attention, so he answered his friends that he just studied the ways of recognizing the healing herbs. Arco and Simon cunningly laughed at the boy when suddenly Arco stood sharply and ordered Sora to stop this working chatter. In the end, he tried to find out something else. Arco asked the man what kind of special connection combines him with these two mysterious nipples. From the surprise, he almost sat. Arco noted that he had a lush breasts, and she is like a real boy girl. And Chris is always calm, but her perseverance and diligence is surprisingly attractive. The Sora was instantly scratching and denied Arco that he did not look at the girls. Arco also lit up with this topic and suggested that Sora to open. He could not believe that Sora really perceives girls not like everyone. Arco asked in Sora which of the girls he would like, and maybe both at once. The Siphon gently hugged Sora and reproached Arco for a bad wording. After all, their Sora is still a naive boy. However, Siphon still asks the boy if he liked one of them. Sora felt the nerves began to pull, and uncertainly admitted that he really liked it. In his imagination, the image of a gentle kiss arose. Sora's cheeks flashed even brighter, and she began to mutter something indistinguishable. The men were eagerly waiting for the Sora to finally answer. At this point, the tavern doors opened, and Rurika and Chris were entered guild. Rurika immediately apologized to the guy for making him wait for so long, but Sora could not calm down, hearing their voices. Sora instantly rose from the table and told his friends that he probably was time to go, but Arco grabbed his hand, holding back. The guy asked in Sora why he was in a hurry. Arco returned to the girls and asked with a smile, why not drink them all together? The girls felt some embarrassment, and Sora kept breathing from fear. So, the boys gathered together and ordered drinks. Meanwhile, Sora and Chris felt a considerable shame for such clumsy acquaintance. They even sat on a long distance from each other at the table and carefully avoided, and Arco and Simophon cheerfully laughed at the guys. A light smile appeared on their faces, and the boys began to whisper that it was she, the one who likes Sori. Arko returned to the siphon and promised to help Sori. Arko turned to Chris, trying to attract her attention. The new moon got up and went closer to the girl. Arko asked Chris whether she realizes how sweet it is. Then he asked her if she had a guy. He gently attracted her to him. Rukrek and Sora were frightened by the fact that Arko was creating now. Sora did not hesitate to stand up for Chris, immediately indicating the Arko that it is not necessary to say that. This guy was outraged by his behavior. Arko asks Sori why he can't say that. He is just trying to share a compliment with a cute girl, noting what she is sweet. Sora began to stutter and get nervous. He answered the interlocutor that there may be a proportion of truth. Arko, taking Chris by her hand, said that until she was his girlfriend, he could tell her anything. Arko asked Sori whether such relationships are possible between them. What really made him tremble? Arko approached Chris's lips and asked the girl how about their relationship. After all, she still sympathized with him. Suddenly, the ruler rapidly jumped out of her place and hit the Arko sharply on the head so that he hit the table. She called him a fool. Rukrera assured the boy that she undoubtedly understands how he feels. However, she still asked if she understood Arko, that Chris was not on her own. Arko stood up and confirmed that he really apologized to Chris. Sora exhaled with relief. Suddenly, their views, Christopher and Sora, crossed, forming a spark that immediately ran between them. However, in a moment they took their eyes from each other without hiding the blush on their faces. In the meantime, the boys finished their drinks and the Soras with the girls went in search of new tasks. They approached a huge board, and Sora asked the girls what mission, in their opinion, should be chosen this time. Ruka noted that she first wanted to clarify one detail and then consider the case. Rukareya asked the Sora whether he was in the rank of E, on which he was now. Sora replied that he still remains on E, but has almost reached the level of D. Rukareya looked at Chris, seeing her upset face. It also upset the girl, and she replied that everything was clear. Rurika noted that, most likely, after completing the next order, they will reach the rank of C. After that, they will leave this country. Having received this order, Rurika suggests that it is time to say goodbye soon. Sora squeezed his backpack tightly, thinking that this moment had to be inevitable. However, he still hoped that this would not happen so quickly. Sora dreams that this moment lasts forever. However, no matter how he wants it, time is relentlessly floating. One moment changes the other, and here the minutes spent together are coming to an end. After completing the task, Sora wanted to find out his rank and looked at the card. It was stated there that the guy had a rank D. Sora was a little surprised, because he did not expect such a turn of events. Ruka gladly informed the boy that he had risen to the rank of D and greeted him at that achievement. Sora, however, shared with the girls the news that they had just reached the rank of C. The guy in his eyes was noticeably sad, and he told the girls what that means. Their team was decaying. So I asked the girls what they planned to do next. Roshai noted that they plan to accompany the caravan to the city of Phesis, after which they will go directly to the kingdom of animals. So I thought that the girls discussed escorts. He wondered what order they discussed. Sora addressed the girls and said he had a request for them. Sora asked the girls to allow him to join their order. Rurika and Chris tensed, waiting and looking forward to looking at the guy. Sora noted that, having such an opportunity, he seeks to gain experience in the hiring of escort. Sora added that when he reaches Physis, he would use a kid to return to the capital immediately. He also noted that he would not be offended if he was asked to give up this idea. A modest smile shone on the girls' faces. Chris replied to the guy that they could only go with them. Rurika suggested that the guy find out if a 3-person team could be involved. Sora assumed that the path to the city of Physis would take about 10 days. Mikari, though a little worried because the task had a marine rank, eventually agreed to give the guy permission for such a trip. There are only 5 days left before the order is fulfilled. Rurika and Chris have decided to relax during this time. Sora still cannot get rid of this anxious feeling. The guy carried a huge backpack filled with goods, and, feeling inspiration, took even more orders for delivery than usual to remain busy. Everyone surprised the endurance of the Sora. The young man suggested that these two were a native house and moved abroad after the war. They could just settle somewhere. However, suddenly his luggage disappeared, as if he had melted in the air. The guy was very intrigued why girls traveled in different cities and countries. Sora reported that the last order today should be delivered to the northern street. It should definitely be there somewhere. Sora stopped on a charming street paved with stones. Here there were a large number of girls who made up the company for men, entertaining them with their presence. Sora noticed in the window that the men were fascinated with gambling while the charming girls were doing massages. Someone stood by hugging someone. This caused the boys blush, because he did not expect to see something like that. Suddenly Arko turned to Sora, noting that he found himself in such a small place. Arko suggested showing him some attractive girls if Sora was interested. With excitement, Sora immediately denied that he was not needed, because he was dealing with delivery. The arch confirmed that it was he who deals with. Sora exclaimed again, confirming the truth of what he said. It is about delivery to an establishment called Dancing Black Rabbit. Suddenly, the girls approached the boy, saying that this order was intended for them. They thanked him for delivery. But Sora was barely breathing, shaking with embarrassment. One of the girls wondered why he did not stay with them. Sora immediately replied that he would not. The guy quickly got up and, explaining to the girls that he had work, hurried in business. Sora walked slowly on this street, thinking that he had just completed the delivery. It's time to go home. Suddenly the boys' looks froze on someone and Sora was horrified. Sora noticed that Chris was standing in front of him, near the entrance to one of the buildings. The new moon could not understand why she was lonely in the area where the priests of love usually work. Sora noticed the man grabbing Chris by his hand and began to pull her to his house. Sora was shocked to the heart. He could not understand what the girl was doing in this place. Kristen assessed her husband's act, so she asked him to stop and not to take any unworthy of actions regarding her. Sora realized that the girl needed to help. The guy called Kiss in full voice, so everyone on the street could hear him. Chris heard a familiar voice and, returning, looked at the guy. The girl was extremely pleased to see that it was Sora. She rushed to him immediately. And the man standing at the door asked Chris if he had a guy. Chris ran to Sora and expressed his sincere gratitude, because he saved her from the malefactor. Sora answered the girl that I was glad to know that everything was fine with her. However, he immediately asked Chris what she did in such a place. He did not expect to see her here. Chris was a little embarrassed and did not know what to answer this question. However, she decided to ask the Sora what he was doing here. Sora looked at the girl with interest. Chris squeezed his fist firmly and, gathering with the spirit, asked for Sora, or sometimes, he did not get some cabbage. Sora replied that no. He asked Chris not to think about it. It just has delivery and brought an order here. Chris lowered her gaze and replied that she understands him. Priestess reported sorry that she wanted to talk to him. The girl asked if it was possible to meet with Rurika when he finished with his delivery. Sora agreed. The boys went to the cafe. Chris shared with the boys all the details of her history, and Ruriko asked the girl whether she turned to the slave. Rarek turned to Sora, gratefully saying him the words of gratitude for the protection of Chris. Then Rukek returned to Chris and noted that she should stop doing such nonsense. Chris apologizes to his roar. Chris stressed that all her actions depend solely on her. She just sought to do something useful. Rurika was comforted when heard it, and thanked Chris for a good deed. Rukrek noted that, nevertheless, there are many dark and dangerous places. Therefore, she should be careful. Sora listened carefully to the girls, and realized that this time Rook was really angry. It was the first time he saw it. Sora turned to Chris, asking what she wanted to talk to him. Chris exchanged looked with Rureka, and both were barely noticeable. Rurik explained to the guy that they discussed for a long time when to raise this topic. Chris apologized for the conversation so late. Chris confessed sorry that they went on a trip in search of one person. Sora, looking at the girls, asked who she was talking about. Chris replied that they were looking for their childhood, who were forced to divorce during the war. Sora asked the girls again if they were traveling in search of friends. Chris replied that he had already told how their hometown was attacked during the war. 10 years ago, the first city to aggression after the start of the war was their home. Then everything turned into ruins, and the children tried to escape to one of the surviving buildings. Little Rurika sobbed so loud that she couldn't stop. The girlfriend called her a real pox. The other girl tried to reassure her, to which she answered not to worry, and said that the goddess would come to save them. Sarah has always been a cheerful, carefree girl, and Eris is a hard-working Elfian, and together they always made an unbreakable four. It lasted until they attacked the Borscht kingdom. The grandmother broke into the nursery and called us all. The grandmother told the boys that the front was already on the approach. The hostile army is approaching them. Grandma screamed to the boys so that they were running into the forest immediately. She begged them to run as soon as possible. Grandma persistently asked her grandchildren at any cost to avoid getting into their hands. And so, children, with fear in their eyes, rushed to flee from enemy soldiers who were approaching quickly. Serenacris at some point separated and began to be lost in the crowd. They tried to find each other, but panic prevented them from doing so. At the last moment, Sarah exclaimed Chris that they would meet later under a tree ghost. Chris tried hard to reach Sulfur, but her efforts were in vain. People rushed the crowd, destroying everything in their way. When everything subsided and a relative silence reigned, Chris went to a place appointed by Gray. The girl trembled with pain and exhaustion. Her body is covered with wounds, and here she stands without one shoe. Chris reached the ghost tree, but her companions were not visible anywhere, and Rugrek was still sitting on a tree near a tree and waited patiently for her friends. When she saw Chris, her eyes were filled with joyful tears, because she finally met at least one of her people. The Rapper immediately jumped from the stone and rushed to Chris. She hugged her firmly, and no longer released. The girls flooded with bitter tears because they did not see their friends anymore. No matter how much they expect, they never came. And so, Chris explained Sori why they went on a trip to search for precious friends. Sora was deeply moved by the girl's history. He was engulfed in sadness when he realized how heavy and painful their past was. Of all childhood friends, only Rurik and Chris remained together, supporting each other until the last. Sora realized that this was the reason why these two loved each other so fervently. Sora sincerely thanked the girls who shared with him their history since childhood, although it turned out to be sad. Sora asked the girls if they had any tips or hooks about places where their friends could be looking for. Rurika noted that children who were captured during the war usually became a commodity in the slavery market in different parts of the world. If their friends were captured and sold in slavery, they can be in any country. It is for this reason that Chris and Rarika decided to become adventure seekers, and now they are looking for information about them in many different places. Chris told Sori that she had asked the slave trader today to ask for a service before leaving the capital. She asked her husband to inform Guild if he received any information about Sarah or Arisa, and even offered him money for it. Despite this, the man grabbed her hand and pulled it to his home. Cric realized that she should be careful from now on. Sora, listening to the girls' conversations, thought it may be the place to look for tips. Sora addressed the girls with the words that it is difficult for him to pronounce it, and he realized that it may seem cruel. However, as Sora noted, 10 years have passed since the war. It is difficult to say if these two are still in this world after so many years. Sora asked the girls why they were still convinced of them. Chris and Rurika exchanged his eyes and smiled gently. The girls squeezed their fists and extended their hands to Sora. They had 2 amulets on their palms. Sora did not hide her astonishment and immediately asked the girls to ask what it was. Rukrera explained to the young man that these charms were called spiritual amulets. The grandmother told them that 4 such charms were forming a whole. Rurika felt that the amulet undoubtedly suggests her. Sarah and Eris are alive and seeking to meet them. Rukrek acknowledged that it may not sound very attractive, but still. Sincerely speaking, they had the desire to stay with Sora for a longer time, but they realized that they must continue their journey in search of friends. Sora was slightly tensed, realizing that the decision to go in search of girls belonged to them. But he had no doubt that he could rely on his reliable satellites. However, the girls found even more power than he imagined. They have turned into brave travelers who are always haunted in their search for missing friends. Therefore, Sora was convinced that he would once be proud of his belonging to their team. Returning to the girls, Sora said with confidence that he believed in them. They will certainly succeed. Sora shared that he intends to visit various countries, and during these journeys, he will look for tips related to Sarah and Eris. Rico and Chris immediately felt guilty to the guy. Rico assured Sora that he should not do it. Chris added that they did not want to involve him in their worries and problems. Despite all this, Sora replied that in no way it would cause him any problems. The young man asked not to interpret him wrongly, because he sincerely seeks to help the girls in their search. It really affected Rarik and Chris. They thought about the words of this guy. In the corners of the eyes, Chris was barely noticeable to tears. This was extremely important to her. Sora saw her feelings and extended her hand to support her. The girls did not slow down and gave their hands in response. Chris and Rurka could no longer restrain their tears and suddenly exploded. The girls expressed gratitude to Sori for being such a support during the difficult period of their lives. Meanwhile, there is only 3 days to order the escort. Sora woke up in the morning, stretched, feeling the pleasure of this morning. Yesterday, when he increased the level of intelligence skills, it seemed to him that he noticed something. The guy remembered that several times it seemed to him that someone was watching him. This feeling did not leave him for a moment, and now he is firmly convinced that in every movement, someone is watching carefully. It made the guy think who really follows him. Just in case, Sora decided to master the skills of concealment and several more abilities that attracted his attention. At the same time, this guy owned the skills of secrecy, which allowed him to completely destroy his presence to go unnoticed. The alchemic war gives the ability to create various objects from different ingredients. Thanks to the culinary Vienna, the user receives knowledge of cooking in the new world for him. Sora looked at the condition indicator and made herself. He did not understand why someone watched him. However, he decided to look as if he had noticed anything. However, the man hesitated for a long time, whether to master the culinary skill. But in order to travel this great world, delicious food will no doubt only benefit them. In the end, it is extremely important for the traveler to understand which of the ingredients are poisonous and which are suitable for food. And of course, be able to properly combine them. Meanwhile, Sora was heading a narrow path, looking at the sky. Huge birds floated over it. Under this thoughtful walk, Sora delves into reflections on plans for today. First of all, he needs to go to the forest, where he usually collects herbs to test his new skills and train. The guy stepped through the thickets and thought that although the wolves had already been destroyed, fear still stayed inside him. Sora dropped into a small gap and felt that this place would be perfect for him. However, before that, the guy decided to take a short break. Sora took out a plate and decided that he had a little hungry, so it was time to have a snack. He specifically left the last piece of bacon for this case. His inventory had a stock of firewood, provisions, and bacon. Sora, virtually using her skills, got bacon with inventory and carefully put it on her plate. However, Sora looked at the plate in surprise. He noticed that his last piece of bacon had ruined. It appeared on a mold, and it became unusable. Sora noted that perhaps if the level of spatial magic is too low, time does not stop. The guy regretted that he could not keep the food, but Sora advised him to raise his level for that. Suddenly, CL has slightly pounded in the face of Sora several times, showing its support. The guy was a little surprised and asked in CL whether he wanted to say that he would not worry about it. Sora laughed and expressed gratitude to the fluffy creation for his support, but that guy was convinced that the thing was not at all to touch. Sora thought for a moment about his further actions and decided that he would do the same. He decided to try to prepare bacon as they did in their village. Sale nodded to him in support. Sora looked at his purchases and noted that there was a pig for bacon. From curiosity, the man decided to take a little wolf. Sometime later, Sora announced that he had prepared all the meat according to the instructions of old age. Now he was waiting for a new task, to set the tree he brought from the village. However, this task seemed difficult. Suddenly then he slipped out of his hands, and the guy did not have time to react. So in addition he drove his rock. The guy had a heavily swollen finger, which was very painful, which causes Sora sincerely and felt sad. Despite the injury, Sora still laid firewood at the bottom of the cauldron. To distinguish the meat from coal, it used the grass frame there. It was a mesh grass that grows near the water and has high strength. After that, the Sora placed the meat on the grill and used the skin as a lid so that the smoke did not get inside. Now, he only has to sit and wait. Suddenly, a hint appeared in front of the guy with the inscription, "Attention." It stated that for the best taste, the meat of the wolf should be smoked longer than pork. Sora immediately realized that this hint concerns his culinary skills, because he just told the boy to leave the meat of the wolf to prepare longer. Sora did and continued to wait patiently until the dish was ready. Suddenly the guy heard strange sounds near him. Sora turned his head and saw that there were two unusual creatures in front of him. Sora saw them and thought they were extremely cute. Animals attracted his attention, so he wondered who they were. To find out this, he used his ability to evaluate. Sora became known that these animals are called michivu, and they can be found in forests. They are incredibly pleasant to the touch, so their strokes have a calming effect. So, Russia came to the spirit, and he reached out to Michivo, but the animals immediately turned away from the boy and began to blow his lips. It was a lot of surprise, because he just wanted to stroke them, but they were too cautious. Therefore, the guy could not get closer to the animals. It really annoyed the guy. However, he decided not to stop and take advantage of his new ability to hide. Thanks to this, Sora was able to get closer to the melting and gently touch their soft wool. His skill is to reduce his or her own presence, and is effective even against observation. Sora was delighted with the extraordinary softness of animals. It was smooth, like silk. After that, the animals began to climb on the clothes of the Soras, gradually rising up. For Sora, this became a real gift, because he considered animals surprisingly sweet. It was a real gift of fate for him. Suddenly, Sora felt a piercing, dissatisfied look from Klal. The guy realized that the fluffy creature began to be jealous. Sora immediately returned to Kiel and reported that he did not want to do it, even apologized. But despite this, the fluffy creature turned away from him and began to fly. Sora tried to catch up with Kel, so as not to expose him to the image of this guy. Meanwhile, the meat on the fire further flashed a fragrant aroma. Subsequently, Sora decided that it was time to check the meat. He cautiously revealed the skin that served as a lid and looked at the piece enthusiastically. Sora noted that the meat is a little pale in color, but its aroma is the same as in the village. Sora cut 2 pieces of meat on different forks and explained quell, which means to divide everyone into a piece. Then he stretched 1 fork fluffy creation, which instantly swallowed the meat. Sora also bitten his piece. Sora and Kel were delighted with incredible taste. Sora confessed that the taste of his dish does not yet reach the taste from his native village, but it still turns out to be incredibly appetizing and hot. The pork came out surprisingly juicy, and the meat of the wolf loses its specific smell due to the aroma of the tree. As a result, both dishes turned out to be incredibly delicious. Sora and Seal were glowing with joy, and the guy shared that he had managed to have a generous portion of bread with bacon. He advised Seal to test his abilities in alchemy. Sora looked at the status panel and found that he was already able to create potions, but only from herbs, such as medicinal or increased endurance. To prepare the potion, the boy needed to take medicinal herbs. But Sora was surprised to find out that he would not even need a pot. Then the soy needed to pour in the manu and imagine the end result. This is a potion. Sora worked for a long time on its creation, and soon a small bottle appeared in his hands. The guy was stunned, because he came to him that he managed to create a real potion. This elixir was in the bottle, but Sora could not understand what the logic was. The guy could not find out whether it was a real thing or not, so he decided to use his assessment skill. Sora was reported that the prepared potion was capable of healing wounds. It can be drunk and poured. However, the recovery effect was insignificant, and the quality left much to be desired. Sora was genuinely impressed, and noted that although the potion was not of the highest quality, it still remained ordinary potions. He could not realize that he was able to create it. However, Sora did not stop thinking whether his potion was acting as it should. The guy suggested to test a remedy on the downtime that annoyed him in the morning. Sora carefully rolled a few drops on the wound. Subsequently, Sora felt the pain in his fingers, though his finger remained red. He noted that apparently the restorative effect was insufficient. Still, Sora said with confidence that everything was fine. He then decided to use the highest quality herbs and pour more mana. Sora took the healing grass of excellent quality. The boy had a small bottle again in his hands, and Sora immediately evaluated it. It was a potion that healed wounds. It could be consumed or applied from the outside. The effect of its use was insignificant, and the quality left much to be desired. Sora thought and noted that the recovery effect increased from barely noticeable to insignificant, but the quality still remained low. This shows that he will have to spend even more points of skills. Sora could not decide what to do with the elixir, drink or pour it. In the end, he was wondering what he'd taste, so he dared to taste. Suddenly, the guy quickly spat all the tincture, which shortly before he decided to drink. The liquid was hit directly into Seal. Sora confessed that the taste was very bitter and unpleasant. He immediately began to get used to a new reality, realizing that he could no longer get wounded. Otherwise, he would have to accept it. After that, Sora decided to taste his Rurik dish, and he treated Chris and Makar. The girls were in a real delight in home bacon. They could not break away from the dish, constantly admiring the culinary skills of a guy who seemed to them a real magician. Meanwhile, the morning came the same day when an order was issued. Sora increased the level of storage art and made everything useful there, which he received from the seller of kebabs. Now Sora was ready to move on. The hostess of the arrival confessed to Sora, which will now become very lonely. Responding, he promised her to return soon and then use her hospitality again. The hotel owner just smiled, escorting the guest and inviting him to return as soon as possible. They are always happy to see it. Saying goodbye, the guest plans to leave a hotel in which he lived for about a month, but for a short time. Sora decided to cast a cursory look at the native landscapes. The guy was honestly preparing for this task. For example, he roasted more bacon and increased his level in fencing. He also raised his levels and similar indicators. Now he managed to read a part of the list of professions, which was previously almost inaccessible to understanding. This list mentioned professions such as the alchemist, chef, and thief. Sora noted that given his current skills, there are already a number of professions that he could choose. However, he was embarrassed whether a change would be possible in the future. Sora cannot read everything yet, because this task was quite difficult for him. He decided that he would return to this issue when he would increase his level. So we approached the gate and heard the Rurik and the Chris sounded the guy. They invited him to approach them. Sora shared with the girls the impressions of a huge number of people around. Rugrika replied that yes, this time 7 equestrian carts and 5 accompanying detachments gathered here. Sora noted that it turns out that they are not the only ones who stand on guard. Suddenly, a man approaches the gathering and says to everyone, "Good morning." The man respected the worship before all and expressed gratitude for taking the order for protection. After presenting, he reported that his name is Dalton, and he is the leader of this caravan. The man reported their idea. Having gone through the western gate, they will go for 4 days to the city of Ulka, where they will stop for a day. Then, having spent 6 more days on the road, they will get to their goal, the trading city of the name. Dalton confessed that, though not for long, he still looks forward to working with them. He bowed again, and all those present congratulated him with applause. In addition, he noted that the members of the experienced mountain goblins will take care of the order. It was a detachment of C. Dalton gave several guidelines to their leader. Sora was quite surprised to see the Siphon. Siphon, without waste, gladly turned to Sora, noting the surprise that they were on one task. Having happily hugged the girl, Siphon lit the atmosphere, asking the audience whether they heard that Ray was declared. It was a mild embarrassment. However, Siphon took a serious look and was going to make a speech. The man once again introduced himself and said that he was a leader of the mountain goblins. Siphon learned that there are several newcomers who are involved in the escort task for the first time. The man noted that their journey would not be short, but their task, to watch the monsters and robbers that can happen on the road. Siphon suggested that everyone just enjoy this adventure, and everyone around burst into applause and supported the Siphon. I assumed that it was his first task, and everything just started. The guards were ordered to open the gate, and a large column of carts and people went on the road. I decided that as long as they get to the Ulka, the carts will be completely filled with load, so they will have to move slowly. Since there is no seat, everyone will have to go near the carts. Rukrera turned to Sora, inviting him to make all possible efforts. Sora supported the girl. One of the participants of the task appealed to Sora and girls, asking if they were also newcomers. Sora noted that he was the only one, because the girls are already busy with similar tasks. The guy replied that he realized everything, and now they would become friends. The guy laughed, noting that it was the first order for them. However, according to him, the task seems simple. They only need to go side by side. Sori picked up his opinion, confirming that it really was. Rura, with a serious expression, turned to the boys and warned not to depreciate this task. They already had experience with similar orders that were quite complicated. The guy replied to the girl that it was possible even for 2 young ladies, although they had enough forces. Siphon looked at the boys and told the girl that he seems as if they were having a great time. The girl confessed that she was not left thoughts about the newcomers and whether they would be all right. She was very worried about them. Siphon laughed and said that although the task could look quite simple, it would not be easy to complete it. They should carefully monitor what is happening around. You never know when monsters or bandits can attack them. And all this during a tireless walk. Simple, but at the same time a difficult order. In addition, a large fine imposed in the event of theft or damage to part of the load adds motivation to perfect work. And constant protection is very tiring morally. At the same time, the requirement to keep up with the pace of carts will be a real test for endurance. Xiphon noted that the newcomers in the case of accompaniment are usually so exhausted that they are barely holding on their feet. The girl asked the Siphon if he already knows all this. Why not share some advice with them? Siphon replied that it is quite possible to reach Ulk without threatening danger. After all, the difficulties gained by their own experience will help them to grow mature. Siphon asked the girl to look at them, because they were overwhelmed by joy. Are they really stupid, or maybe they have potential? Well, time will show how events will develop. In the meantime, an hour has passed. The guy looked forward and announced that someone was approaching again. The guy grabbed the sword and prepared for the battle. But when the trolley drove by, he calmed down. He confessed that every time he passed his cart, he cannot get rid of the idea that dressed bandits can hide there. The girl, in response, said that when she hears some sound in the grass, she expects that the monster would jump out. Another guy confessed that he was extremely tired. The guy noted that they should continue their journey and not lose vigilance. This is not easy. Suddenly, Sora reached out to his friends a mug of water. They were quite surprised and immediately rushed to quench their thirst. The girl appealed to Sora to ask if he could use simple magic. The guy looked carefully at Sora and noted that he did not look tired. He then asked if Sora was like a beginner as they were. Sora began to be nervous and replied that so, just that. The guy suggested that he had saved the skill in walking. Sora thought about the possibility of checking other wagons and nearby space with the help of detection skills. This skill was activated with him, and since he just strolled, the conductor did not spend the SP on the use of skills. Sora was convinced that, organizing support and at the same time improving his skills, he gained the experience of the guild. In addition, every step brought him experience. He reached several goals with one shot, as if he killed 3 rabbits at once. Sora decided that it may not be worth telling them about it. However, the guy was amazed and asked for Sora why he smiled so mysteriously. Sora said he just likes to walk. No one could believe it, because the forces were left. Sora stated that he was such a person, and the interlocutor in response noted that he just went crazy. Meanwhile, as many as 10 hours. Seitan turned to the boys and reassured them, assured that everything is wonderful and they were real well done. He proposed to break the camp here at night. However, all the boys were very tired after the road and just fell to the ground. Seitan asked the guys what happened to them. It's only the first day. As soon as they get to Ulka, they will be able to continue the trip in the carts. Everyone immediately began to be indignant that they would have to walk for 3 more days. Suddenly the sight of the siphon will hold on something. The man saw the Sora standing above Chris and Rurka, trying to support them. Sora turned to the girls, asking if they were all right. Siphon was struck by the strength and endurance of Sora. Noting that he showed a wonderful result, Siphon asked Sira, asking if he was still able to walk. If so, he could help equip the camp. Sora replied that yes, he would try. However, no one was able to figure out how Sora continues to move. The evening of the first day has come. Siphon turned to Sora, noting that you first needed to take care of food. He asked for Sora if he had culinary skills. Rurika did not slow down, assuring that yes, of course. Chris added that they can cook, but first you need to relax. The ingredients for dinner were provided by their customer. It was the first time for Sora when he was dealing with such a huge cauldron filled with products of this world. The guy sincerely hoped for a successful result. Sora was thinking that some ingredients remain a mystery to him. However, his culinary skills can handle any call. Today, boys will enjoy a hearty soup with fragrant spices for dinner. This guy realized that all the difficulties of travel can be overcome due to delicious food. Rukurek tried the dish and said sorry that this soup is very sharp, but at the same time cool. Chris added that it has many different ingredients. Ryrika noted that he knew about the culinary talents of Sora, but he could actually be cooked with anything. Sora answered the girl that no, this is all because of their help. Chris and the river exchanged his eyes, but before they had time to answer the boy, Soraya ahead of them and stated that she already knew what they wanted to say. Sora asked the girls if they wanted food, but it was quite burdensome to rely on others in this matter. And suddenly, unexpectedly for everyone, Sora pulls a plate with a juicy bacon and extends it to girls. They were fascinating with joy. Chris and Rukurek glowed with happiness and stated that this bacon was simply unsurpassed. Sora noted that in his magic storage it is still enough. The man was happy that the reserve did not let him down, and he created so much. Sudden Sora jumped and moved sideways. The girls asked the young man where he went. Sora took a few pieces of bacon and told the girls that probably other participants are still hungry, so he would go to give them a little. The girls were a little surprised, but soon smiles played on their faces. They were pleased to feel such attention from the guy. At that moment, a detachment of goblin from the Aksham Mountains, which belonged to the rank of C, was located in a small circle, talking lively during the dinner. Sora approached them, wishing a nice evening. Sitifon was glad that she joined their company. The man hugged the boy and invited to join their company. Sora apologized to them for taking care. Greeted Sora and noted that Siphon told them a lot of interesting things about him. The guy was quite surprised to hear. Siphon told Sora that he was his wife named Juno. This news was even more impressed by the guy. Siphon told the young man that they had just discussed him, and remembered that there was a real character here. One of the participants of the detachment noted that today the guy walked great. All others fully supported this opinion. The guy felt severe embarrassment, but still thanked his companions timidly. So I told the team that he had prepared something for them, and suggested that they may want it too. Siphon replied that he really cares about them and in no way forgotten. The man wondered in Sora what it was. He has never seen that. He said Sora to find out in the guy whether this dish was already cooked or more raw. The boys decided to taste their friends. They immediately stipulated that it was incredibly delicious. Siphon assured a man that such a rarity is found even in the capital. Youngly remarked that it was so delicious that she could eat it daily. Sora was extremely glad that the boys liked his dish. He mastered her preparation in the village, where they went for order. Suddenly, the face of the Siphon became incredibly serious, and he returned to Sora. Siphon noted that he had already heard of their intention to disband their group with girls, so he would like to ask a guy if he wants to join their team. The young man looked at the man in surprise. Siphon said he has endurance and strong legs and lower back. In addition, it prepares perfectly. Siphon was convinced that the participation of a boy named Sora in their team would be both exciting and useful. The rest of the detachment assured Sora that his soup was unsurpassed. Sora felt very tense, and Siphon added that the proposal was not really that bad. Sora replied that he was pleased that he values him so high. However, by combining efforts with Carcass and Chris, he realized that there is a considerable way ahead. That is why Sora seeks to go on a trip for a certain time. But now he is not yet able to take care of himself. Despite his answer, Sora asked the boys not to hesitate and invite him to the team. As she was asleep, Siphon confessed that he had been thrown away. Sora tensed and apologized to the boys, but still thanked them for the invitation. Siphon replied that it was a true horror, but nothing could be done. You know, you said Sora that if he changed his mind, let him let you know about it. Sora expressed gratitude to all the boys for their support. At that moment, Sora seemed to be watching him. The young man feels that by joining another team, he can put others in danger. That evening, Sora shared his dreams with other adventurers and merchants, and heard many interesting stories about this world. Meanwhile, the night fell. Sora lay next to Chris, catching her breath. It was difficult for him to decide what to do, because he could not sleep because of this. Sora decided to try, at least partially, to dive into sleep, thinking in parallel. 3 days later, a detachment of adventurers arrived in his first stop, Ulka. The boys did not hold back joy, shouting that they finally got to their destination. Sora believed that this city was Ulka, although there were no high buildings here as in the capital, but the overall appearance of the city was impressed. It was really extremely beautiful. Siphon turned to the boys and told them that they all coped perfectly. The man informed that now it is necessary to unload the wagons, so tomorrow they will have a day off. He urged the guys to take advantage of rest. Suddenly, Siphon emphasized that it would be dangerous now, so you need to be careful. He also reminded them of not forgetting to replenish the potions just in case. Siphon looked at the boys and realized that they did not pay attention to him. They had the only desire, now to go for lunch. Chris turned to Sora and reported that tomorrow they would be free. Rurika asked the young man with a smile what their plans were on this day. Sora answered the girls that he wanted to plan something for tomorrow. The end point of the team's trip is Face's Trade City. However, already near the capital, in the city of Ulka, merchants unload the goods and replenish their stocks. The rest of the adventures are carefree entertainment and visits to bars. Everyone finds their ways to spend time. Someone is immersed in inaction, dreaming of spending all day in bed. Well, Sora, together with girls on this day, plan a little special. Sora came to the horses and congratulated them on a good morning. A number of horses were lined up in front of men who carried heavy cargo to the city. Sora and girls stood near the equestrian carts, and there were buckets of water near them. They tuned morally, realizing that they would soon have to do hard work. Sora decided that today they would take care of the horses. The boys brought with them buckets, rags, and brushes for cleaning, as well as a bag of treats for their faithful animals. Chris returned to the boy and asked why he decided to do it today. Sora replied that he saw them for the first time, so not a sin to try. Sora made gratitude to the girls for wanting to help him, although they were tired. Chris noted that she would also like to look at her horses. Rurika added that after a good sleep, they feel great. I answered the girls that everything goes just wonderful. Dalton gave him some tips yesterday, so you can now take a job. Sora told the girls that they should first feed the horses. The young man believes that horses in this world also enjoy carrot-like vegetables. Sora stretched out carrots to the horse. At first he sniffed it, and then ate with pleasure. Chris also tried to feed her horse. The animal immediately crossed the carrots, and the girl noted that this horse is incredibly cute. After that, the girl gave a horse a few more carrots and assured her that you could eat well. She still has many vegetables. The horse did not lose the opportunity and ate everything she was treated by the girl. Unexpectedly, A girl's bag with vegetables immediately emptied. She was very surprised and asked if the horse had eaten everything because the vegetables were gone. Chris announced a mare that she plans to visit a new carrot batch. But here, completely different ideas were ripe in the horse. Her gaze, which focused on Chris's head, testified that something unexpected was being prepared. The girl was alert. The horse unexpectedly began to chew Chris' hair, and the girl at that moment began to shout and panic. Sora and Rukarek immediately intervened to save her hairstyle. The boys began to get acquainted with the horses. They gently stroked them, and Rubik noticed how quickly this horse eats. Sora was also angry, watching how sweet these creatures are. Further, the plan was to clean the horses. She filled the bucket with water and took the fabric. The guy poured a bucket of water on a horse, noting that he had got dirty after 4 days of travel. Therefore, he really wanted to achieve the horse to be pure and impressed with his beauty. The guy was joined by the girls, and together they took up the washing of the horses. The bucket of water was pouring on them. The rags diverged in all sides, and laughter and fun were heard around. Sora looked at his horse and announced that he had finished with him. Men wash them is not easy, so it will take a lot of time. Sora immediately thought that if you go at that speed, the road would take the whole day. But suddenly one mention was illuminated. Due to its cleaning ability, Sora immediately changed everything around him. Horses became extremely clean and joyful. They began to extinguish and enjoy carefree games fun. Sora laughed lightly and noted that it was time to bring their fur. Sora approached one of the horses and began to comb it with a brush. The boy noted that the horse has a truly strong physique, and the brush is so easy and smoothly sliding on his wool. It seemed that Sora was obvious that the merchants were growing them with great care. Rukrera told the guy that it is probably very nice. Because of this, the girl also wanted to try. Chris joined this desire. Children with tenderness and caution began to iron animals. Suddenly, Sora heard a strange noise behind herself. She looked around and saw that there was Claw. Sora noticed that Seal was looking incredibly upset, and it seemed as if he had asked for something from a guy. Sora seemed that the Fluffy just wanted to be stroked. However, the man shook his head and warned Seal that he could not be touched. It is very upsetting, Kel, so he again decided to fly from this guy. He flew near, but his heart was enveloped in deep longing. Sora did not leave it out. The guy smiled lightly and used the magic of storage. From the inventory, he pulled a small piece of bacon. CL instantly realized that Sora holds food in his hands. After a moment, Kel had time to eat this piece, and then he moved away from the guy again. Sora thought he was too self-assured. In the meantime, the boys are busy cleaning, and feeding horses. Dalton approached the boys and noticed that Sora, along with the girls, had already put the horses. The man expressed gratitude for being so careful about animals. He even heard their joyful rust. So, I replied that they should not thank. It was a wonderful experience. Rarika cheered the boy, noting that the horses were surprisingly miles. Dalton asked the boys what really happened. Horses are great companions for people. And the man was happy, hearing it in response. Dalton carefully stroked the horse, and noted that the animals seemed to be very fond of them. The man asked the guys if they did not want to try to ride. The guy, without the slightest hesitation, replied, "Yes, of course." Dalton planted the boys on the horses and praised them, noting that they were doing great. So soon Dalton went with the boys for a small walk. Sora was hardly aware that he was currently on horseback. The Russians asked Dalton why they were so used to humans. He replied that horses are really extremely sensitive to emotions. Their carelessness indicates that they are all very friendly. Sora asked Dalton if he really thought. He sincerely hoped that it was true. Soren was enthusiastically watching the incredible landscape. The sun was hiding behind the horizon, hugging the tops of the mountains with its golden rays. Sora wondered how beautiful it was a sight. From a height, this landscape seemed incredibly fresh and exciting for the guy. For a moment, Sora looked at the girls. He looked at Chris. Sora considered herself incredibly beautiful. Suddenly, she noticed that Dalton and Rukek with cunning smiles were looking at the guy nearby. This caused the excitement in the Sora, and he immediately told the boys that it is too late, so it's time to return. Chris supported him and added that it was time to go. Sora did not expect Chris to be on his side. It was even more embarrassed by the guy, and he shouted to others to escape. The horse suddenly carried the rider and rushed. Sora began to get nervous and asked the horse to reduce the speed a little. The next morning, the siphon announced the beginning of the second stage. It will take 6 days to get from the ulcer to the shopping city of Phasis. They had nothing left to go on the road. The boys prepared for the road. They no longer needed to go from the Ulka to the Thesis. Most cars were unloaded at the OLIA station, which freed room for new goods and travelers. The boys themselves give feedback to the third wagon. Several travelers are located on the roofs of their vans, watching the environment. Sora rose to the cart, and Rukarek asked him to be careful not to fall. Sora wrapped himself with ropes, tightening them well. Surprisingly, it turned out to be much more convenient on the cart than he expected. Kucha returned to Sora and warned him that they would increase speed so the road could be a little unstable. He advised to be careful, because those who are not used to such often feel nausea, as if from a sea disease. Suddenly, the boys began to shake frantically. Sora turned to the girls and wondered if they were all right. Rukrek replied that everything was fine with them. The girl wondered how things were in Sora. The guy came to the conclusion that it was not for him. The whole body was tired and the head was tired of shaking. But suddenly, Sora noted that the nausea had disappeared. The guy realized that it was his improved ability to recover. Due to this, his illness disappeared, and he felt normal again. Sora assured the girls that he was feeling good and able to cope with any difficulty. Sora realized that he had just thought it was over. Nausea returned again, and it was likely that the next wave would become even stronger. Sora sincerely hoped that this would at least contribute to the development of his skills. It would be great for him. The boys continued their journey without adventure, being in a sublime mood. The cart asked Sora whether they would split when Phesis would get. Sora answered in the affirmative. The driver expressed his journal feeling, noting that it is difficult to travel with such beauties and then part with them. The driver advised the boy that he would just go with them in his place. He even abandoned his craft for the sake of it. Sora laughed at these words a little. It has been 4 days since they left Ulka. After a short vacation for lunch, the carts were again moved on the road. About 2 days of the journey remains to the trade city of Physis. The whole route seemed extremely easy and enjoyable for them. The guy was aware that they were all right, but suddenly something had changed in his mind. I was reported to find that someone in the forest is in the forest. Sora immediately wanted to turn to the boys, but stopped himself. After all, no one knows about his unique abilities. The guy reasoned whether to tell him immediately. The driver wondered in Sora that he was up there. The man began to hesitate. Sora began to think about what to do now. He is not sure whether these creatures are indeed monsters, but if the guy tells about his ability, the observer can guess that Sora has noticed it. Sora was convinced that someone would certainly pay attention even if he did not break a word. And suddenly, there was a click next to the guy. To the wonder of the guy, Kel was confidently through the mess. Sora asked him interested in what happened. After all, as he remembered, Kel was not very fond of being in such conditions. Sora noticed that Seal was extremely upset. It made the guy be wary. Sora introduced his friends to each other, thinking that they could all be at risk. It is unclear only why he was worried about his own safety. Sora realized that he did not necessarily have to speak about his skills. It is important to convey them to someone else. Sora turned to his Rurek and said that he was concerned about the forest that had been spread on the right. The girl began to explore the territory without hesitation, and Sora confessed that he could not understand what it was. The guy asked to look, but looking carefully, she just got a surprise. Rurika immediately contacted the siphon to inform him of the urgent news. The girl reported that the 6 objects they see to the right are probably wolves, given their size, and they are heading in our direction. In a moment, Siphon stopped all the carts. Seton warned the whole team that a flock of 6 monsters came from the forest to the right, and apparently it was wolves. Everyone began to whisper, and the Siphon ordered to take combat positions. Siphon explained that the priority is to ensure the safety of merchants and horses, and after that, protection of cargo. Only then is it about the safety of the adventurers themselves and the lives of their comrades. The guy was naked and began to say that they had not yet found out the relationship with the wolves. She still hopes that they will be able to cope. Sora was staring in danger. The young man also felt tension and suspected that something was wrong. Sora noticed that their movements looked extremely strange. It's like one pursuing 5 other. Siphon captured a rustle in the forest and immediately warned the whole detachment that they were approaching. White wolves and a huge monster suddenly jumped on the boys from behind. This monster grabbed one of the wolves. Simon immediately realized that Tigroloff was in front of him. White wolves ran away from the monster. This is what embarrassed Sora. The white wolf, being in the monster's mouth, waved in pain. The rest of the wolves, when heard this, instantly paid attention to their friend. They noted that one of the comrades got into a difficult position. Sora watched carefully, believing that they attack a tiger wolf to save him. The wolves were angry at the monster, so they rushed at the tiger wolf, desperately fighting for the life of their friend. But in a moment, Tigrovovka pushed away all the wolves that attacked him, with one powerful blow to his paw. The white wolves flew into the air and then rapidly fell back to the ground. The boys were stunned, and Sora believed that he had thrown them far away. White wolves rose on their paws, tearing out of the pain that penetrated their entire nature. The tiger wolf cheated fiercely, after which the white wolves trembled even more. Under the pressure of the horrific roar of the malicious monster, white wolves hurried to escape. They raced directly to the carts and detachment. Siphon warned the boys about the approaching guests. It was necessary to be alert. Siphon suggested that the beginners be left behind and guarded the merchants, while others would go into battle with wolves. Siphon urges not to panic, but to destroy enemies one by one. Their detachment will cope with the tiger wolf. Sora turned to the background and asked why they should not help those guys. The Siphon replied that they have not yet had time to relax after the road, so they would only interfere. Siphon asked them only to watch the battle and trust all experienced adventurers. You have already informed the Siphon that they went on the road, to which he answered that he understood, and so the tiger wolf rusted-headed at the detachment. The monster stopped at the detachment. Citan returned to Juno and noted that, as always, he instructed him a rear of the rear, and the avant-garde would try to break the enemy into pieces. Unexpectedly, Citan said that today, look extremely charming. You know it. And she immediately activated her strength. You mobilize all your passion and rush directly to the tiger wolf, and the avant-garde is ready for a lightning attack. The man gathered all his strength and hit the tiger wolf hard, but he cleverly evaded, remaining unharmed. The advanced fighter made the sound of annoyance and exploded. The terrifying monster was preparing to strike the avant-garde. He swung his paw, and suddenly a protective shield grew in front of him. This shield was installed by his partner, and the guards found him reliable. The guy mastered the shield and skillfully controlled the monster. At the same time, the Siphon gathered for battle. Siphon swung and struck straight into the monster. A smile appeared on the face of the Siphon, and he shouted loudly, "War! Now!" Suddenly, an arrow hit the monster. It was hard to believe, but the guy from the team was genuinely glad to hit the target. At that moment, when Sora and girls watched the actions of the detachment, they noted that the boys acted impressively. Chris was amazed that this guy was able to release an aerosol so cleverly without using the magic of the wind. The ruler added that they were not only guys. She was convinced that the monster had no chance of salvation. Sora turned to the girls. So this is the famous group of mountain goblins. They were undoubtedly wonderful adventurers. Sora suggested that it was a group of experienced travelers. At this point, the monster began to ooze from the wound. The tiger step of the trembling, but remained alive. Meanwhile, the warriors met with a couple of wolves on the battlefield. The brigade of mountain goblins opposed Tiger Voku. The experienced team faced 3 wolves. The newcomers stood in order to protect the merchants, and the merchants themselves concealed in the carts, watching everything that happened around. Tigrelap, at least a little weakened and shaking in pain, but was still set up to attack the boys. The boys watched how experienced travelers destroy the monster. They discussed that it was a flock of mountain goblins. Suddenly, white wolves appeared around the boys, ready for attack. One of the young men urged the rest not to delay, paying attention to the danger nearby. One of the wolves immediately rushed at the boys, and one of them managed to impress him with a sword. The boys shouted and beat right on the beasts. One of the boys also attacked a white wolf, and his friend praised and said that he had coped perfectly. At this point, Sora, girls, and all the newcomers stood with their mouth open, absorbing every detail of the battlefield. The young man noted that they are all incredibly strong and overcome the monsters with ease. Rukek expressed the opinion that in such a development of events, everything could end soon. Sora agreed with her, noting that it really looks like this. Suddenly, Sora noted that Kel flew to him again. Sora turned to a fluffy creature, asking if they feel something wrong. SL, without hesitation, he confirmed that yes. Then Sora tried to find out in SL whether there was something else. Suddenly, from the forest heard a rustle, and at the same moment a flock of white wolves jumped on the boys. From the forest, like a whirlwind, they rushed to a detachment. One of the monsters flew into a guy who did not suspect and could not respond in time. Sora noted that another flock of monsters suddenly rushed at them. He realized that the attacker was already close, and warned the boy to be careful. Sora quickly realized that the guy would not have time to respond in time. Therefore, he strongly pushed him to the ground, passing the white wolf that swore nearby. The wolf closed the jaw directly in the air without harming anyone. White Wolf suddenly stopped and looked at the boys. Chris was stunned by the fact that they were attacked by another flock of wolves. Sora was thinking that he made a mistake, switching off the detection system, which was why he did not notice their approach. Suddenly, Rudica snatched the sword and warned the boys from panic. To encourage the team, the girl turned to the boys and reminded them that their task was to protect the merchants. And together they exclaimed that yes, this is true. The boys began to destroy all the monsters who tried to attack them. Rurek managed to strike a white wolf. After that, Ruraki shouted loudly that it was now a -1. Kristen remained stationary, but directed fiery magic to a flock of wolves. At once, a few monsters flared with flames and began to burn alive. Sora with a scope struck his sword on a monster that burned under the influence of Chris magic. This made it possible to destroy another white wolf. And Sora told the team that they had about 2 minutes. The young man encouraged his comrades, noting that they had a striking combination. The next step, Chris used her magic of wind against one of the wolves. This created a powerful pillar of air that lifted the white wolf into the sky, depriving it of strength. Strong wind streams reliably kept the animal without giving it the chances of escaping. The huge pillar of the mighty wind tightened the wolf, and it began to spin in the summer. Immediately, Chris joined the battle. The girl struck without delay directly on the monster, which immediately fell to the ground. Sora turned to Chris and praised her for a beautifully done work. In response, Chris encouraged the boy, noting that he also coped with the monsters. At the same moment, Siphon, who along with his detachment tried to cope with the Tigrov wolf, was surprised at how loud the aliens were. When travelers returned to them and asked what happened, suddenly their eyes expanded with horror. Siphon told the detachment that a flock of wolves appeared there again. The tiger wolf took advantage of the confusion among the soldiers who began to growly to the team. Gathering all his power, he immediately rushed at them. The first victim was a guy with a shield, which the monster grabbed his paw. He pushed the opponent with the shield. He lost his balance and found himself on the ground. The monster raced past them, and when he saw it, the Siphon did not restrain his husky. The tiger wolf gained speed every moment, rapidly rushing to a team of beginners. Siphon realized that they were seriously stuck, so he shouted to the handful so that he would run, because the girl was the purpose of the monster. Rurika looked around and saw a tiger wolf rushed to her. But a white wolf was already flying ahead. The girl was confused, feeling that she could find Himaj between two enemy forces. Rurika put her 2 swords next to the white wolf, exposing her back in front of the tiger wolf. Rurika turned and saw with horror that the monster was already approaching. The girl immediately realized, things are bad. There is almost no time to act. Suddenly, Sora rushed to the help of a girl, attacking the paw that was flying to his Rory. The Sora rolled past the monster and fell to the ground, rolling several times, but managed to gather properly. Siphon and Rurika were scared of the guy. They began to shout him, calling to be ashamed. Sora carefully tried to get out of the earth, but lacked strength, and his whole body trembled. After that, Sora suddenly stood up and immediately put his sword, set him straight to the monster's mouth. He shouted that he would not even allow him to touch his comrades.